Lord of Mysteries, The Arrival of the New Black Emperor by Huo Yang. Chapter 376-400. Although Alger had guessed the answer, the others still didn't quite understand what Emperor meant. Before Derek could ask, the extremely curious Audrey asked first, "Mr. Emperor, why can't we make a similar request to the Fool now?" Klein was also very curious about this. Having learned from the previous gathering, the Fool did not rush to flare up. Hobert smiled. Of course, it's because the Fool currently has more important matters and will not respond to such prayers. If the Fool were willing to respond to this, he would have you cooperate in relevant experiments. He thought to himself, I can't possibly say that the Fool can only respond when he reaches sequence 6, or preferably sequence 5, right? Audrey, of course, heard the hidden meaning in Mr. Emperor's words. She recalled the several attempts made under the Fool's instructions before and immediately understood. The Fool's current power to influence reality is not yet sufficient to make such responses. She recalled, from the initial attempts to pull people in, to the later attempts with his honorific name, and then to the future attempts of sacrifice and bestowal, the Fool is gradually deepening his influence on the real world. If the Fool one day asks the Sun to cooperate in making a charm, it would mean that the Fool's power has further recovered. Finally, Audrey was very puzzled. How did Hobert detect all this information, as well as the previous speculation about the Fool's pathway? Furs and Derek both sensed that Mr. Emperor's words seemed to have a hidden meaning, but Furs, having joined the Tarot Club for a shorter time, didn't immediately grasp Mr. Emperor's hint. And although Derek had made some progress during this time, he had only progressed to the point where he could tell that Mr. Emperor had a hidden meaning, but for a while, he couldn't quite figure out what Mr. Emperor was specifically referring to. Klein, on the other hand, smiled, so I'll have such an ability in the future, I wouldn't have known if no one told me. Alger, observing that the Fool did not express an opinion on this, confirmed his previous guess. Undoubtedly, the Fool is gradually breaking free. Judging from his indulgence of Mr. Emperor in expressing these statements, he does not mind the other members of the Tarot Club guessing this information. Perhaps the Fool needs Mr. Emperor to explain this. Alger then sighed inwardly. This can prove that Emperor truly knows how to deal with deities, which is an advantage other members do not possess. Thank you, Mr. Emperor, Derek said with a slight bow. Hobert waved his hand, indicating it was nothing. Then Derek spoke of the matter that had made him anxious just now. Elder Lovia, the shepherd, who led that exploration team, has returned. They completed the exploration of the fallen creator's half-destroyed temple. And I found that several team members I know have undergone certain changes in personality. Alger said with a confident tone, they have been corrupted by the true creator. Then what should I do? Derek asked anxiously. I've already reported it to the chief, but the chief doesn't seem to believe me. Even Furs, who made herself adhere to the principle of listening more and speaking less, couldn't help but remind him, that's because your chief suspects you're possessed by Amon and are plotting something detrimental to Silver City. This made Derek even more anxious. Alger, however, after 2 seconds of thought, said, actually, your chief should now also be paying attention to the shepherd and the members of that exploration team. For Silver City to have lasted until now, the high-level officials still possess basic vigilance and will not let go of every possible threat. The only problem is that their level of concern is not yet high enough. He paused and then deliberated. Perhaps this incident can be used to clear you of suspicion. Find an opportunity to make a member of the exploration team show enough abnormality and then have a conflict with him. This way, your 6-man council will discover something is wrong and increase their level of concern. And at the same time, hand over the time worm, saying that during the conflict, you suddenly became dazed, didn't know what happened, and only vaguely heard someone shouting, "True Creator." When you woke up, you had already coughed out that worm. Involving an evil god, many methods and abilities cannot be used. Your chief will logically guess that Amon's avatar and the mental pollution left by the true creator clashed, eventually perishing into a dead worm. Your surveillance will certainly be reduced a lot because of this. If you behave for a while longer, the suspicion will be completely gone. Audrey's mouth slightly agape, she thought. Why does Mr. Hanged Man seem so skilled in this area? Hobert, once again, sighed inwardly. This is the true level of the deputy commander. Yesterday, when I went exploring with him, he seemed to be unable to utter a word for half a day. I even doubted if this was truly the original second in command of the Tarot Club. Now that I think about it, I showed enough assertiveness and strength at the beginning of the exploration. His caution and reticence were the smartest ways to handle it. Smart people know when to keep quiet. Derek's eyes lit up as he listened, feeling that Mr. Hanged Man was indeed trustworthy and had come up with such a good idea. He then asked, how can I make the exploration team members show a sufficiently abnormal state? The world, who had been silent, said, I have an item here that has been mentally contaminated by the fallen creator. I can lend it to you, but its value is very high. If you lose it, you will have to pay a certain compensation. Next, Alger helped the son finalize the plan, and Derek prepared to look for an opportunity to carry out this action after returning. At the same time, he knew that he wouldn't be able to sacrifice to the fool for a while, so he planned to sacrifice the 7 main materials of Sequence 8 that he had already exchanged before the operation to repay Mr. Emperor's previous debt. The remaining 2 main materials would have to wait a while longer to be repaid. After the son's matter was resolved, the world asked in a gloomy voice, Mr. Emperor, do you know any information about Mr. Door? Alger was stunned. He had also heard Mr. Emperor's description of Mr. Door just now. Since Mr. Door could be mentioned in the same breath as the fool, did that mean he was also an ancient deity? Hobert nodded. During one exploration, I learned some information about Mr. Door, and later, through other channels, I learned some related information. I think my intelligence on Mr. Door is quite comprehensive. The world said, I want to know the relevant intelligence. What reward do you need? The world added, I've also learned some information about Mr. Door, but it's not comprehensive. Hobert thought for a moment before saying, I have 3 pieces of related information here. Mr. Door's experiences, Mr. Door's current state, and Mr. Door's influence on the real world, which I learned during my explorations. I imagine this information would be difficult for you to acquire. Each piece is worth 600 gold pounds. You can choose one of them to trade for, to verify the quality of my intelligence. Alger quickly said, Gentlemen, may I also participate in this trade? Through the previous trades, he naturally knew that the information related to Emperor was absolutely worth more than its price. Now Alger had just been promoted, and crucially, neither of the main ingredients had cost him his savings. He also had a lead on the main ingredients for Sequence 5. He planned to digest the potion while working as a pirate, accumulating gold pounds to buy the Sequence 5 main ingredients and the potion formula. Currently, Alger was still relatively wealthy, and being a pirate was also a very lucrative profession, which allowed him to have enough spare money to buy some high-end intelligence that would be completely unavailable elsewhere. Hobert nodded. If 2 people trade, each person only needs to pay 350 gold pounds per piece of information. Audrey quickly raised her hand. Me too, me too. 250 gold pounds per person, per piece. Klein's mouth twitched. 3 250s. The approachable, price-made furs also want to trade for 1 or 2 pieces, if I also participate. 200 gold pounds per person, per piece. The son also said a little awkwardly, I really want to join the trade, but I'll have to go into debt again. Hobert smiled. It's all right. If you participate in all 3 information trades, you will need to pay for 2 main ingredients at the Sequence 8 level. If all 5 people participate, it's 170 gold pounds per person, per piece. Klein, behind the gray fog, suppressed the urge to click his tongue. He once again witnessed Emperor turn an 1800 gold pounds deal into 2550 gold pounds. And everyone looked excited, as if they had gotten a great bargain. However, Klein did not object to this, because in this way, even if he participated in 3 trades, the cost would be controlled within 600 gold pounds. Klein believed that Rosel's diary mentioned Mr. Door multiple times, and given his savings, spending 600 gold pounds to understand the relevant information was quite a good deal. Hobert smiled. Since everyone is participating in the trade, there's no need to bother the fool Mr. with shielding certain members' senses. He paused and continued, let's start with the first question. Mr. Dorr is the ancestor of the Abraham family. Furs couldn't help but exclaim, the ancestor of the Abraham family. Hobert nodded, yes, is there a problem? He naturally knew why Furs exclaimed, but he didn't want Furs to know that Emperor was Hobert yet. Even when discussing the Lady of Contracts with Furs, he planned to directly send a messenger to speak with Zio and Furs alone. Furs quickly said, no problem. She felt that Emperor Mr. S. current answer was already worth 170 gold pounds. At the same time, she believed that she was the biggest beneficiary of this trade, because for her, she needed to understand these answers more than the other members. Hobert continued, during the Fourth Epoch, Mr. Dorr supported the Blood Emperor and the Tudor Empire. In a battle, he was jointly exiled by the Black Night Goddess and the Lord of Storms. Klein, behind the Grey Fog, exiled by two true gods working together. Previously, I thought Mr. Dorr was only an angel-level existence. Now it seems he is of a higher sequence than I previously imagined. Audrey was a little surprised, exiled by two true gods. So, this Mr. Dorr is very powerful, isn't he? Is he also an ancient god like the fool Mr.? Or is it that all ancient gods with Mr. in their name are more powerful? Alger, on the other hand, sighed inwardly, this is the second deed of the Storm of Lord I've learned in the past 2 days. Before joining the Tarot Club, for me, his deeds were only recorded in the Book of Storms. The son, Derek had previously traded information about the 7 gods with other members. He knew the Black Night Goddess and the Storm of Lord. Indeed, Emperor Mr. S. intelligence often involves the struggles between true gods. The most surprised was Furs, who was participating in such a trade for the first time. Black Night. Black Night Goddess and the Lord of Storms. This is a battle between deities. Is the ancestor of the Abraham family that powerful? Needing 2 deities to jointly exile him. Also, why aren't you surprised? This is a battle between deities. This is the first time I've learned information about deities having some association with the real world. After calming down slightly, Furs gradually understood. The previous trades they conducted, the 2,000 gold pounds level trades mentioned by Emperor Mr., all involved information about deities. Oh my god, what kind of gathering have I joined? Audrey asked curiously, Emperor Mr., why did the goddess and the Lord of Storms exile Mr. Dorr? Hobert smiled, the answer to this question is a gift, because they both supported the Night Emperor's Terenzost Empire at the time. Only then did Furs realize that this was actually related to the 4 emperors, content in history textbooks. Did the wars between the 4 emperors involve a god war? Hey, why aren't you surprised again? Do you also know all of this? She seemed to recall her experience of falling behind her classmates' learning progress during school because she had taken sick leave. Audrey then asked, if the Night Emperor had the support of deities, why didn't he achieve ultimate victory? The value of this question is very high. Hobert smiled, I dare say, I am absolutely an expert in this area. Let me think, based on the information I know, this information is worth at least 5,000 gold pounds. Audrey and Alger were both stunned. This was a whole level higher than the 2,000 gold pounds information. It seemed that the Night Emperor's failure was a very crucial period in the history of the Fourth Epoch. Klein, the history of the Fourth Epoch is much more complex than I imagined. Hobert then said, the second piece of information is Mr. Dorr's current state. Does anyone want to withdraw? Originally, Furs planned to only listen to one piece of information, but now she had changed her mind. Klein was wondering if he should have the world withdraw from the trade. After all, even if the world's senses were sealed, the fool would still be able to hear the upcoming trade. However, thinking about how long he had been freeloading, Klein really felt too embarrassed to play such a trick. The key was that the information given by Emperor was worth the price, making him feel that paying a certain price was worthwhile. The other members also had no intention of withdrawing, so Hobert continued, "It is said that Mr. Door liked to roam in the starry sky before becoming an angel. During that process, he suffered some contamination. When he became an angel king, he was sealed and exiled in a battle." "The world?" asked Angel King. Alger then asked, "Contaminated by whom?" Audrey also belatedly realized, such a powerful existence was actually contaminated. Furs, on the other hand, thought of the information she had learned from the fool and Hobert. She thought, could it be that because Mr. Door was contaminated, it triggered the Abraham family's curse? But if that were the case, the Abraham family should know where the curse came from. The fact is, the people of the Abraham family also seemed to not know the source of the curse. She found that the information she had obtained was not enough to allow her to make an accurate judgment, so she followed up by asking, is Mr. Door's contamination related to the Abraham family's curse? Alger suddenly looked at Magician. Before she joined the Tarot Club, we did discuss the Abraham family's curse, but after that, we never discussed this issue. Why does she know about the Abraham family's curse? Is Miss Magician a member of that family? Audrey also had a similar guess. She looked at Furs. She seems very concerned about the answer to this question. Is she being troubled by this curse? Why haven't I heard Furs talk about the Abraham family? Furs was a little confused. Why are they looking at me like this? Oh no, I've exposed my connection to the Abraham family. Good, good, this won't cause too serious consequences. Hobert smiled and said, I will answer your questions one by one. The most core value of the second piece of information lies in the concept of Angel King. Do you still remember the uniqueness I mentioned before? Miss Magician, right, in Mr. World, if you want to understand the concept of uniqueness, you can trade with me or other members. I think this information is worth £600, which is a very favorable price. As I said before, at other gatherings, even if you spend £6,000, you wouldn't be able to get such high-level information. Alright, let's get back to the topic of Angel King. A sequence one who has accommodated the uniqueness of that pathway, or has accommodated another copy of a sequence one extraordinary characteristic, is an Angel King. At first, this seemed like just a title, but later, it gradually evolved into a level between Sequence 1 and a true god. Klein used his clown ability to keep his expression and body movements unchanged, so that's how it is. In other words, after accommodating the uniqueness, a qualitative change will occur, but it has not yet fully reached the level of a true god. Alger was somewhat excited. The 7 deities must have all gone through this stage. I wonder what kind of opportunity they waited for to complete the process of becoming a god. Audrey shook her head and smiled. Here we go again, once a week. This is another blasphemy against the deities. If Hobert's blasphemous remarks were put together, it would be a paper that would shock the entire Beander world. The title of the paper could be called, How to Become a God. Derek carefully took note, knowing, of course, that this was extremely high-level information, so high-level that there would be no record of it in the entire Silver City. Furs was stunned for a moment before realizing, Sequence 1. True God, the end of the potion sequence, is the path to becoming a god. Oh, my God, this is really a blasphemous idea. Why do you all still look so matter-of-fact? What exactly did I miss before? Also, this is a description of the process of becoming a god. It's only worth £170, don't you find it strange? Is the Tarot Club too high-end, or am I too ignorant? Soon she had the answer, I am too ignorant. Hobert continued, it's not that Mr. Hanged Man didn't ask the right question, but rather that I cannot tell you about the existence that contaminated Mr. Door right now. Because in this giant hall, with the Fool's protection, we're fine. But when we leave this hall, merely knowing his name is okay, but if we know any detailed information about him, we will be contaminated. With the previous information about Adam and Amen, Klein was not too surprised by this. there seem to be some unknown existences in the starry sky. It's more dangerous than I imagined. Hiss, Rosal communicated with Mr. Door so many times, he wouldn't have been contaminated too, would he? Alger, there are some existences in the starry sky that can contaminate beyonders. Furs, that's terrifying. Well, if I don't know, I don't know. As for Miss Magician's question, Hobert added, this involves the third topic I'm about to discuss. Does anyone want to withdraw from the trade? Since there are none, let's continue. He paused and then said, during an exploration of a ruin, yes, it was a ruin, I discovered a document similar to a notebook. It recorded the process of a saint being lured by Mr. Door, successfully advancing to sequence 2, then being lured to the starry sky and becoming contaminated. I won't go into detail about how he was contaminated. Everyone just needs to know that the angel later returned to the real world, and he might still be active in the real world even now. If anyone has a channel, you can report this matter to the church. His name is Spike Antigonus. Audrey exclaimed in surprise, he is definitely an emissary of an evil god. Klein was first surprised, that angel was actually named Antigonus. His experience is so similar to Rosal's. But then he breathed a sigh of relief. Good, Rosal still had at least some caution. He wasn't lured into letting Mr. Door return, nor did he try to find Mr. Door. Wait, as far as I know, he wasn't lured and didn't try to find Mr. Door. Could the great emperor's ultimate tragic fate be related to Mr. Door? Alger, however, was not surprised. He had always been at sea, and of course, he knew how vast this world was. A contaminated angel would certainly have a hiding place. Furs, this world is actually so dangerous. I am only a sequence 8, why do I need to know all this? Hobert finally said, now I will answer Miss Magician's question. Whenever there is a blood moon, it is when Mr. Door is awake, and he is trying to communicate with members of the Abraham family. Furs thought of the fool's previous answer to a similar question, he may not want to harm you, he is just asking for help. She gave a wry smile, what a deadly cry for help. Furs immediately said, thank you for your answer. You're welcome. Hobert smiled. If you agree to be my contracted wife, we'll be a couple, so there's no need to be so polite. One more chapter. After concluding the transaction regarding Door, Mr. Furs belatedly realized that she had spent a whopping £10 today. This was nearly half of all her savings. She sighed inwardly, fortunately, I'm not in a hurry to advance right now, otherwise, my remaining savings wouldn't even be enough to buy a sequence 7 potion formula from Hobert. Although Zio had a method to summon Hobert's messenger, and they were eager to know Hobert's recent situation, they hadn't dared to write to Hobert for fear of being monitored. The World, who seemed quite active in this gathering, spoke again, I'm selling an extraordinary characteristic of a werewolf. Does anyone want it? How much are you prepared to offer? Apart from Hobert and Alger, the others didn't even know which sequence the werewolf extraordinary characteristic belonged to, but Alger wasn't interested in it. Although Hobert knew where this extraordinary characteristic came from, he still asked, did you eliminate a Beander from the Rose School? When did you eliminate him? Except for Little Son, everyone else had heard of the Rose School, this secretive organization, but besides Alger and Klein, the others didn't know the main pathways of Rose School members. Yes, the World replied with a hoarse, smiling voice, you seem to know them very well. I witnessed a large-scale extraordinary battle against them, Hobert answered vaguely. Audrey was very curious, when did Hobert witness this battle? Why had she never heard him mention it? Klein also marveled, Emperor truly has a rich experience. The others didn't know Hobert, so they didn't have much of a reaction. I eliminated this werewolf more than half a month ago, the World replied. Hobert pretended to ponder for a moment, £1,100. If you agree, we'll make the deal. He then explained, although a typical sequence 7 extraordinary characteristic is worth around £1,200, I'll have to wait some time before I can sell it, and I'll also bear a certain amount of risk. Furthermore, as you know, extraordinary characteristics of this pathway are not bestsellers, across the entire North Continent. For Hobert, purchasing extraordinary characteristics above Sequence 9 was a sure profit business, but he had currently lost two sales channels: Military Intelligence Section 9 and the Church of the Black Knight Goddess, so he indeed needed to find new channels before he could sell. The world immediately nodded and said, "Deal." He, of course, knew that this was already a very good price, and he knew that Emperor was currently in Fenaport, so even if he sold it immediately, it would be difficult for the Rose School to suspect him. After their transaction ended, Audrey curiously asked, "Gentlemen, which pathway does the werewolf Beander belong to?" Hobert said, "Prisoner." Audrey nodded. She had learned another new pathway. Furs then asked, "Does an extraordinary characteristic refer to the substance that condenses on a Beander's body after he dies? Why are there extraordinary characteristics?" She had seen extraordinary characteristic transactions during her previous actions with Hobert and knew that they were equivalent in value to the sum of the main materials of that sequence. When she and Zio discussed it privately, they seemed to vaguely understand the principle of extraordinary characteristic formation, but they didn't know it precisely enough. Everyone looked at Emperor, as this was information that Emperor had previously sold at the Tarot Club. Hobert said, "This is very important information in the extraordinary world. You seem to know a part of it. I'd like to understand what you already know first, so I can price this round of the transaction. If you're not comfortable with this, you can ask the Fool Mister to be a witness." If it had been at another gathering, or before today's transaction, Furs would still have suspected that Emperor was trying to extract information, but not now. How could an emperor who knew so much high-level knowledge try to extract information in this way? "Emperor Mister, I completely trust you," Furs said. "I know that extraordinary characteristics are things that condense after a Beander dies for a period of time. Their value is equivalent to the corresponding main materials. Although a bit disgusting, they can also be used as main materials. A friend and I suspect that it might be the potion that the Beander previously consumed, but I don't know why it would recondense after the Beander dies." Hobert nodded. "You only know the principle, but you don't know the specific law. I believe that completing the remaining relevant laws should be worth around £200. 2. Furs thought about her remaining £600+ in savings. Emperor Mister, can I exchange chapters of Spirit World Observations for the relevant information?" Hobert smiled and shook his head. "I'm sorry, I'm not interested in those chapters. If other members are interested in Spirit World Observations, they can trade with Magician Miss. That's your knowledge, I don't mind." Alger and Klein had no intention of trading, and Little Sun wasn't very interested in Spirit World Observations. Only Audrey was interested in Spirit World Observations, and by observing Hobert's body language and tone, she knew that Hobert genuinely didn't care and even seemed to be encouraging everyone to proceed with this transaction. After a moment of thought, Audrey immediately understood. Hobert should have also recognized that Magician was Furs, so he hoped to take care of his friend. However, completing the remaining law of the indestructibility of extraordinary characteristics was indeed worth that price. If the price were set too low, it would be disrespectful to her, as she had previously spent several £100s to learn the answer. So Audrey initiated a trade with Furs, and after hearing the answer, Furs had a feeling of sudden enlightenment, understanding many things at once. After this transaction ended, the world said again, "Please keep an eye out for the mutated pituitary gland of a thousand-faced hunter and the hair of a deep-sea naga for me." The digestion rate of the Sequence 7 potion was faster than Klein had expected. He estimated that he had hope of advancing to Sequence 6 before the new year, so he needed to quickly prepare another main material, as well as auxiliary materials that were not common on the market. Alger said, "I know where to sell deep-sea naga hair. How many do you want? The transaction can be completed tomorrow." Klein needed 3, but he asked for 5, which cost him a total of £500. Audrey, who had successfully joined the psychological alchemists, also promised to use her channels to keep an eye out for the world, Mr. The trading session ended here and moved on to the discussion session. Audrey, with a faint smile, said, "Last week, an interesting case occurred in Backland. Death and justice tarot cards appeared at the crime scene. The protagonist of this case was called the Messenger of Death, and it is said that he represented judgment from death. Thank you for your votes. One extra chapter is delivered. *******. Hobert was stunned. Messenger of Death. It didn't sound as good as Black Emperor, the Rogue, but the death card should make the spirit body more solid, which theoretically would be more practical for K. The other members first looked at Mr. the Fool, as everyone had just learned today that Mr. the Fool had an angel from the death pathway serving him, and a tarot card was even left at the crime scene. This seemed to be another case related to the Tarot Club. Of course, no one dared to meet Mr. the Fool's gaze, so they all turned their attention to Emperor. Hobert spread his hands. If I had done it, I would have only left the Emperor card. Everyone exchanged glances. Was there a Beander from the death pathway here? So everyone thought of that angel from the death pathway again. Even if an angel wouldn't bother with such trivial matters, it must still be somewhat related to that angel. Audrey could only continue. The victim was the wealthy Capping. Many rumors identified him as Backland's biggest human trafficker. According to witnesses, a gentleman emanating a deathly aura and pale white light was seen at the scene. People suspect it was an emissary sent by death to Judge Capping. After Audrey briefly recounted the news she had read in the newspaper, Klein, from behind the gray fog, chuckled lightly. My dependents made a small, insignificant contribution in this matter. Indeed, Audrey cheered inwardly. Furs, who had been very concerned about this for a long time, thought to herself, this is the second Tarot Club related incident I've encountered in reality. Tarot Club members seem to commit crimes quite frequently. The Hanged Man then began to brainstorm around the two elements of capping and human trafficker. The little son wasn't interested in this. While Hobert smiled widely, K's potion is almost digested. Klein added leisurely, he gained two Beander extraordinary characteristics from this incident. He hopes to sell them as soon as possible. Those two extraordinary characteristics correspond to Sequence 8 Sheriff and Sequence 7 Inquisitor, respectively. Everyone suddenly realized that this was an extraordinary pathway controlled by the Rune royal family, so everyone began to make their own associations. Klein was somewhat disappointed to see that Miss Magician wasn't interested in this. He had originally thought Miss Magician would immediately ask for the price. After all, she had a friend from that pathway. To Klein's surprise, Emperor asked again, Mr. the Fool, how much does your dependents plan to sell these two extraordinary characteristics for? Klein was slightly taken aback, £600 and £1,200. I'll take them, Hobert said almost without thinking. His upcoming, comprehensive plan for revitalizing the territory's economy required a large number of extraordinary characteristics. He could never have too many of these lovely extraordinary characteristics that he could reprocess. Even Audrey marveled at Hobert's wealth. Today, he had already acquired 3 extraordinary characteristics, totaling £2,900. Klein also sighed. Is it true that treason makes one rich? However, he also thought of the reward Emperor earned today. Emperor's wealth was also related to his extensive knowledge. After exchanging information about Messenger of Death, Audrey asked again, Mr. Emperor, Mr. Hanged Man, did your exploration yield any results? Hobert smiled. We gained quite a lot, but it was also quite thrilling. He began to recount yesterday's adventure. Hobert spoke lightly of their hunting expedition as soon as they landed on the small island, as if the two extraordinary creatures known for their agility were as easy to kill as 2 hens. Alger added, the hunting of these 2 extraordinary creatures was so easy, thanks to Mr. Emperor's abilities. Klein glanced at the two of them. Before this, the Hanged Man had always maintained his position as second in the Tarot Club. After this expedition, the Hanged Man had acknowledged Emperor's strength and now showed signs of willingly becoming third. Audrey also noticed that the Hanged Man seemed to be considerate of Hobert's feelings. Hobert continued his narration. When he spoke of the two-dimensional space, he felt the fool's scrutiny, but he had long been prepared for this. At this moment, Audrey's curiosity made his previous preparations even more natural. Audrey immediately asked, "Two-dimensional space? What a fresh theory." Hobert smiled. "When I was studying at Backland University, I once formed a good friendship with a physics professor over a small matter. He mentioned this theory during a casual chat. It is said that the prototype of this theory came from Emperor Rosal, but many professors also believe that this theory is just the Emperor's conjecture. Because there is a lot of debate, professors do not teach these things in class and generally do not use them in their papers or writings." His statement was well thought out. Algernon, the little son, had not attended university and could not distinguish the truth from falsehood in these words. Furs attended medical school, and Audrey's lessons were conducted at home, so they also couldn't verify it. Klein was a proper university graduate, but he was a history student, a world away from physics. Besides, how could a county university compare to Rowan's top universities? So the other members had no way to verify the truth of these words. Even Klein, upon hearing Emperor Rosal's name, said inwardly, "Indeed." Hobert felt the fool's gaze gradually disappear, and he knew his rhetoric had succeeded. At this moment, Furs delivered another assist. "I think I heard a certain science fiction writer also talk about a similar theory." Hobert was not surprised. The ideas of some science fiction writers were indeed ahead of their time, because they only needed to imagine and didn't need to prove anything, while some scholars would be sufficiently cautious before they were confident in one of their theories. He didn't intend to recognize K just yet. That would make it awkward to interact. It would be better to wait until he needed K's absolute trust. Hobert continued his story. When they heard the part about outsmarting the evil god, everyone held their breath for Emperor and the Hanged Man. Fortunately, Emperor was vigilant enough not to let the evil god succeed, and everyone couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Then he talked about the experience in the fog. Hearing that even the ghost was tricked by Hobert, not only Klein but also the other members exclaimed, "Such a maneuver is possible." Then Audrey was the first to ask, "Mr. Emperor, is that beached ship the legendary ghost ship?" Hobert said, "I don't think it's a ghost ship in a purely mystical sense." Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Even in the extraordinary world, exploration experiences like those of the Emperor and the Hanged Man are relatively rare. Hearing that the Emperor was going to express his views on that ship, everyone looked at him with curiosity. Hobert explained, "As far as I know, there is a type of ghost ship on the sea that has self-repairing capabilities, and even self-piloting capabilities, requiring very few crew members to operate it. It is said that as long as it doesn't suffer a fatal blow, it will never sink." Alger was stunned. His ship was just such a ghost ship. "There's also another type of ghost ship that can only be seen under certain conditions," Hobert said. "I've heard of some ghost ships that constantly wander a particular sea area, and people only see them in the fog or in extremely bad weather. The lights on it, on the Erie Sea, are as frightening as will-o'-the-wisps. Even if you ignore it, sail around it, after a period of time, it will reappear in the same way, in the shipping lane ahead. Some people have tried to board such ghost ships to investigate. They saw circles drawn on the chart in the captain's cabin, indicating that it was constantly sailing in circles within a fixed sea area. Of course, more people who boarded such ghost ships never returned. The atmosphere in the Giant's Hall instantly turned cold. Everyone had a sense of déjà vu, as if they were listening to Hobert tell a ghost story. Hobert paused, then continued, "Such a ghost ship, I believe, can already be considered a creature of the underworld or the spirit world. It probably, for some reason, the entire ship transformed into an existence like a wraith. The existence of wraiths is due to sufficient obsession. A ship that sailors have poured too much emotion into might, under some coincidental circumstances, generate something akin to obsession, causing it to wander between the spirit world and the real world. Everyone found the Emperor's theory very novel, yet very interesting, and theoretically sound. Finally, Hobert said, "Just like the stranded ship we encountered, the sailors on it and the ship itself might not have realized that they had died and sunk. I don't know if the saint on the ship is in the same state as the ship and its sailors, but they should be in a very strange state. They believe they haven't died, so they are still alive, at the intersection of the spirit world and the real world, still repeating the same work every day. If no one disturbs them, this state might continue for a long time. Logically speaking, a saint shouldn't be so muddled as to not even know if he is dead or not." However, the situation at the time was special. Hobert estimated that when the underworld emperor fell, the impact on high-sequence beyonders of the death pathway was immense. Or perhaps that saint lost control because of it and became a monster, which is why the ship's state was so strange. It wasn't until Hobert finished speaking that Furs praised, "Mr. Emperor, your logical perspective is truly powerful. Although these are all your conjectures, they are incredibly convincing." Hobert nodded slightly, "Thank you for your praise." Klein finally understood why the hanged man would willingly step aside. The Emperor's calmness, rationality, and extremely strong logical perspective demonstrated during the exploration process were indeed admirable. He couldn't help but wonder, is this the characteristic of the lawyer pathway? Cold-blooded, exceptionally intelligent, with a very strong logical perspective. After everyone's praise, they discussed the Trenserost Empire for a few more sentences, and this Tarot Club meeting concluded. Hobert returned to the real world and, as usual, spaced out for a while. Then he went out to instruct the chef to make some donuts. The two chefs in the kitchen were both Light Viscount's former cooks, one of whom was skilled at making various desserts. This was Lord Hobert's first instruction, which made the chef put in his utmost effort, using his best skills to respond. Hobert then returned to his bedroom to write a letter to Furs. The content of the letter was simple: "Tonight at 8 p.m., I will meet you and Zio in Backland. Please be sure to be home, and there should be no one else in the house." The signature was Hobert. When the donuts were ready, Hobert took a bite. The taste was quite good, and only then did he summon the messenger. God-forsaken land, Silver City. Derek, already aware that he was being monitored, simply made no pretense in sacrificing to the fool and requesting the fool's blessings. After obtaining the item filled with true creator's mental pollution, as mentioned by Mr. The World, he began to ponder how to find an opportunity to clash with the members of the exploration team. Just as he was thinking this, a member of the exploration team actually came knocking. Derek immediately realized that while he was suspicious of Shepherd Elder Lovia, she was also suspicious of him, and this team member must have come to test him. Fortunately, with Mr. Hanged Man's guidance, Derek remained calm. After confirming that there was a monitor sent by the chief in the corner of the room, he began his performance. He invited the team member into the room and chatted with him. For a moment, Derek almost fell under the spell and ate the food the other party brought. Fortunately, he knew that this member must be problematic, so he resisted his appetite and found an opportunity to let the other party come into contact with the mentally polluting item. Just as Mr. Emperor and Mr. Hanged Man had guessed, the other party instantly lost control. In the ensuing fight, Derek's acting was consistently on point. After eliminating his opponent, he still had enough energy to re-sacrifice Mr. The World's item to the fool. Then he began to cough violently until he coughed out the time worm, and following Mr. Hanged Man's guidance, he said he was in a trance, said he heard the true creator, and then handed over the time worm. The chief, upon hearing his subordinates' report and Derek's lie, indeed fell for it, thus clearing most of Derek's suspicion. Backland, Wood District. After Furs returned to the real world, she sat alone on the edge of her bed, savoring the information she had received from the Emperor. Although she felt pain for her £510 expense, she had to admit that the information, relative to the price, was truly worth it. As the Emperor himself said, such high-level intelligence was only available to the Tarot Club. Throughout the afternoon, Furs pondered the matters of the Abraham family, envisioning the adventurous experiences of the Emperor and the Hanged Man. Until the atmosphere in the room suddenly turned cold, as if something with immense mental pressure had suddenly appeared in the air. Just as Furs was about to activate her spirit vision, a letter suddenly flew towards her. She instinctively reached out and caught it, and the immense mental pressure immediately disappeared. Furs then reacted, throwing the letter onto the bed, and she herself jumped up, ready to flee out of the house. Suddenly, Furs remembered the messenger Hobert had mentioned. Only then did she pluck up the courage to open the envelope. It was indeed Hobert's letter. He was going to sneak back to Backland tonight. Furs realized this was a big deal and quickly went out to find Zio to discuss it. Fenaport Kingdom, Jeffrey Town. Hobert planned to meet Zio and Furs after completing his sacrifice to the Fool. Hobert only snapped out of it after the Tarot Club meeting. I worked so hard, talked so much, and now I have to pay back £860. The income from the intelligence about Mr. was a total of £2,550, but £510 of that from Little Sun was paid with 2 sequence 8 main materials. And now, Little Sun is still under review, so payment will be difficult for a while. Therefore, Hobert's timely income was only £20-40, and Hobert spent a total of £2,900 at this Tarot Club meeting, so he still had to offer £860 to the Fool. However, upon seeing the 3 extraordinary characteristics and Little Sun's 7 sequence 8 main materials, Hobert put the £860 matter out of his mind. Hobert recognized 3 of these 7 main materials. Madness Grass, one of the main materials for a barbarian. He waited patiently for a while before offering these extraordinary characteristics and extraordinary materials to the country of disorder, and used chaos power to crush the extraordinary characteristics, allowing them to separate and recondense. Hobert made a few preparations and, at 7:55, used travel to go to Backland. Hugh and Furs, who had been waiting in the living room, suddenly saw the space before them become illusory, and a familiar figure emerged from the illusion. Good evening, ladies. Hugh covered her mouth. Oh my God, Hobert, what ability was that just now? Hobert smiled. An ability Furs will possess in the future. From Fenaport Kingdom to Backland, it only takes about 2 minutes. Furs shook her head. You made us worry for nothing. We thought you were going to infiltrate Backland to carry out some destructive actions. We even prepared to hide in the East District for a while if Military Intelligence Section 9 started watching us. There's no need for that, Hobert said. You moved out of your rented room early, so Military Intelligence Section 9 will at most conduct a simple investigation, they won't monitor you. And the travel ability is very covert, they will have a hard time discovering my tracks. The 3 of them sat around the dining table, and Furs poured Hobert a cup of tea. Why did you betray your country? If it were a normal friend, Furs wouldn't ask this, but knowing Hobert, he wouldn't get angry over such a question. This involves a power struggle at the top, and the military's unfair treatment of my father. Hobert took a sip of tea. As for me, I just blindly followed along. Furs and Hugh nodded. This was consistent with what they knew. Hugh asked again, how is the Fenaport Kingdom? Are their government departments really as inefficient as the rumors say? Hobert was taken aback. I don't know much about that. I was ennobled as a baron, and now I'm on my own fief. Furs, we saw it in the newspapers. I remember you said your current potion name is Corrupted Baron. Being ennobled as a baron must be what you meant by seeking new development, right? Thank you for paying so much attention to my activities. Hobert paused and then said, I came back this time because I ran into a problem and needed help from a very trustworthy friend, so I thought of you too. This made both Hugh and Furs very happy. Being trusted by a friend naturally brings joy. Furs immediately said, if you need any help, just say the word. We will do our best to help you solve your troubles. They had already secretly made up their minds that they owed Hobert so many favors before, and they must help him with this. Before Hugh could respond, Hobert clapped his hands and said, "That's great. Actually, that favor is very simple for you." Furs nodded. "Tell me. Be my Baroness." The room was silent for 3 seconds, then Hugh and Furs both blushed. Hugh said, "Oh Hobert, this is too sudden. I mean, you two aren't even engaged, you haven't even met each other's parents, and your wedding house should be." "Hugh, that's not the point." Furs looked at Hobert. "That joke isn't funny at all." Hobert chuckled. "This is not a joke. A secret organization sent a lady to monitor me, and I need a baroness to deal with her. Perhaps it's because I'm too handsome and too capable. Many nobles in Fenaport want to marry their daughters off to me. That's when I realized I needed the assistance of a trustworthy baroness, so I thought of you, Miss Furs." But, Furs butted, for a long time, not knowing how to describe her current feelings. Hugh also didn't know whether to say, "Congratulations," or to carefully inquire about Hobert's views on marriage. Seeing Furs's embarrassment, Hobert smiled. "It's not about truly becoming my baroness, it's more like a contractual marriage. You can view baroness as a profession." I plan to pay £2,000 annually as your remuneration. I can lend you the magical item with travel, and you can travel freely between Fenaport and Backland. We'll publicly claim to be husband and wife, but in reality, we'll still be good friends, and nothing beyond friendship will happen." Furs let out a long sigh of relief, and at the same time, she found that she felt a slight sense of disappointment inside. Hobert drained his cup of tea. "Sorry for scaring you just now. I had no other choice but to ask for your help." Furs thought of how she had just vowed to help, and immediately blushed a little. Contractual marriage, this sounded like the beginning of a standard romance novel. She then saw Hobert's sincere expression, recalled her trust in Hobert, and her long-held desire to repay Hobert's favors. Furs thought for about 5 or 6 seconds, then nodded and said, "Hobert, I am willing to help you, but please adhere to your promise just now." Hobert immediately said, "Don't worry, I'll pay you £1,000 as a deposit tomorrow." Furs's cheeks turned crimson again. "I was talking about contractual marriage." Hobert smiled. "No problem. Since you've agreed to help, then I'll pick you up in the living room first thing tomorrow morning, and we'll go to the fief to get used to the environment there. Oh, and remember to prepare a suitcase, as if you've traveled a long distance to my fief." He stood up and said, "Well then, ladies, I won't disturb your rest." After speaking, Hobert left using travel. The living room was quiet for a while before Hugh chuckled, "Congratulations, Baroness." Furs glanced at her. "I'm still missing a maid. How about you pretend to be one?" The next morning, around 8 o'clock, Hobert, dressed in Fenaport noble attire, appeared in the living room again. Furs emerged from her room. She had clearly made a slight effort to dress up. Her yellow long dress accentuated her slender waist and long legs, and her unique lazy charm became exceptionally captivating. Hobert's gaze swept over Furs's figure. Suppressing Helen would be no problem. He extended his hand. "Please, my fiancée, Miss Furs." Leaving the spirit world, Hobert said to Furs, "You don't need to be so nervous. Look at how beautiful the scenery is here. Just think of it as a vacation." Furs took a deep breath. "This is my first time having such intimate contact with a man. How can I not be nervous?" Her intimate contact referred to linking arms with Hobert. Hobert thought about it. It was natural for a young woman to be nervous in an unfamiliar environment, and there was no need to overly demand her composure. On the way back to the mansion, everyone respectfully greeted Hobert as Lord, secretly glancing at the beautiful young lady on his arm. It was then that Furs truly felt she had arrived in Hobert's territory. Upon reaching the entrance of the Lord's manor, Hobert announced loudly to the busy people, "This is my fiancée, Miss Furs. She has just arrived from afar. From today onwards, Miss Furs will be your, and this territory's, mistress." The people who were repairing the mansion immediately put down their work and saluted Furs. Philip, in the crowd, breathed a sigh of relief. Although this young lady's attire did not seem local, her clothing and demeanor indicated good upbringing. As long as the Lord was not swayed by beauty, He truly feared that one day the Lord would openly marry that seductive woman kept in the courtyard into the Baron's manor. Helen, who came out to watch the commotion, pouted, just linking arms. What's there to be shy about? After the two made an appearance at the entrance, Philip stepped forward and invited Furs to the room prepared for her. The room prepared for Furs was cleaned up overnight yesterday. It was in the same courtyard as Hobert's room, separated by a study in the middle. Hobert's residence and the main hall had already been repaired, and the renovation work on the Lord's manor was largely completed. Upon entering the room, Furs felt a wave of heat envelop her. She didn't see a fireplace, but the room was very warm. The room's decor was not overly luxurious but very elegant. All the furniture and items were brand new. There were no elaborate ceremonies as she had imagined, nor the need to constantly maintain her posture, which greatly improved Furs's mood. After Philip left, Hobert took out a paper bag. "This is the deposit I promised yesterday." Furs, however, smiled. "To be honest, I was just planning to help out, and it feels strange to take your money." "No, this money represents my respect for you," Hobert said seriously. "Of course I know what a great determination it represents for an unmarried lady to help in such a way. This represents both my respect and our friendship. You must accept it, otherwise I would feel uneasy." Furs then accepted the paper bag. "Then, what do you need me to do?" "You rest first," Hobert smiled. "What I need you to do has already been done, which is to make an appearance in front of everyone. I think by tomorrow at the latest, everyone in the town will know that the Lord's fiancé has arrived. Oh, by the way, during lunch, Helen will still dine with us at the same table. That will be your first test. Don't be kind to her, you need to show some of the main wife's, the Baroness's aura. Don't worry, I'll help you suppress her. Don't be nervous." Furs took a deep breath. "Okay, I'll prepare myself." Immediately, Hobert let Furs rest. He first checked the progress of the table's creation, then called Philip to start on official business, recruit another 40 to 50 people. Starting tomorrow, they will build the tomb for the Light Viscount's family. Philip said, "Lord, we don't need that many people. Only 20 or 30 people, and it can be completed in 3 or 4 days." Hobert was surprised. After inquiring, he learned that the nobles of the Fenaport kingdom, or rather, the nobles of the entire North Continent, did not have a tradition of lavish burials. The tombs built were not very luxurious or spacious, they were just a few times larger than common people's tombs, with an extra stone tablet and thicker coffins. That was all. At most, some trinkets, jewelry, and tools that the gravekeeper liked during his lifetime would be buried, or whatever the gravekeeper requested to be buried. Hobert recalled his previous tomb raiding experience. The Antigonus family Viscount's tomb was indeed not large, and if it weren't for those traps, the tomb passage certainly wouldn't have been that long. Moreover, there weren't many treasures inside the tomb, and many items had little value when buried. It's just that these things are now antiques after being excavated. Then find 30 people to start building the tomb for the Light Viscount's family tomorrow, Hobert said. Let your son Roy help out. You still need to oversee the Lord's manor here. Philip nodded, yes. Hobert then said to Seal, find a few helpers and notify everyone in town that all residents should come to the Lord's manor tomorrow for household registration. Tell them that after registering, each person will receive 10 negas of grain. Nega is a common unit of measurement in the Fenaport kingdom. Hobert had once tested it by feel and found that 1 nega was not much different from 1 jin, approximately 0.5 kilograms, in his impression. Currently, Fenaport only has 2 units of measurement, 1,000 negas make 1 fenega. Philip estimated that the grain seized from the bandits amounted to at least several hundred fenegas. Hobert certainly wouldn't let this grain sit in the warehouse and mold. Besides serving as food for the workers in the Lord's manor, it had a greater use for Hobert. He instructed Seal, I don't care what method you use, but everyone in town must be registered tomorrow. You can scare them, tell them that if they are not registered at the Lord's manor, they will be considered unregistered residents and will be taxed double in the future. The expenses for hiring helpers should be collected from the butler. This was the first time the Lord had assigned him a task, and Seal took it very seriously. "Don't worry, Lord, I'll get it done for you." Hobert nodded. "Tomorrow, go notify the surrounding villages. Divide them into 2 groups, and have them come to register the day after tomorrow and the day after that. In short, the household registration must be completed within 3 days. You decide how to divide them." He then instructed Philip, "Tomorrow, prepare 15 tables in the front courtyard. Besides the repair workers, have all male servants, gardeners, and stable hands put down their work and maintain order in the front courtyard. Prepare enough grain for distribution. Have trustworthy people distribute it, and don't shortchange anyone. Also, only those who are present in person and have completed registration will receive grain." Finally, Hobert instructed, "Find 2 younger maids to clean the future Baroness's room every day, but if the Baroness does not allow it, it's best not to let the maids follow her around. However, you can have the maids take the Baroness for a tour of the territory." Hobert increasingly found that the lazy Furs was very suitable for the job of Baroness. He had once heard from Zio that Furs could go a month without cleaning her room. Hobert finished giving instructions to his subordinates and returned to his study for a cup of tea. The study in the Lord's Manor had been renovated yesterday, so Hobert no longer had to do everything in his bedroom. He used travel to arrive at Christine's Earl's mansion in Feniport again, and coincidentally, Christine was home today. After meeting him, Hobert quickly told him, "I've found a lady to help me, and she's agreed to be my wife. You can announce that I will be getting married soon." Christine smiled slightly. "It's good to be young, to find love at first sight." Then he asked, "Where is she from? How old is she? What do her parents do?" "She's from Backland." Hobert didn't intend to hide it. "She's a year or 2 older than me. Her father is an officer, currently in the South Continent, and her mother has passed away." Christine instructed Doffus, "Have the kitchen prepare a table of Backland specialty dishes for lunch." He then ordered, "Please invite that young lady over for lunch, the 3 of us will eat together." Hobert was startled. She's in Backland, it's quite far. "Don't you have travel?" Christine said with a smile. All right, I'll go ask her." Hobert had originally come to ask Doffus for help, but Christine's interruption made him completely forget his purpose. He used travel again to return to the Lord's Manor, knocked on the door, and entered Furs's room. Furs was still wondering what attitude to take when facing the witch Hobert mentioned. Hobert smiled and said, "The test has changed. You have to come with me to meet my father." "Ah." Furs jumped straight out of her armchair. This is too sudden. You don't need to be so nervous. Meeting my father is much easier than outsmarting a witch. You don't understand," Furs said with a wry smile. This was meeting the parents. Even as a contract wife, meeting the parents was 100 times more nerve-wracking than meeting a woman who was seducing her man. But since she had agreed to help, this was a test she would have to face sooner or later. Furs meticulously tidied herself up again, carefully adjusting her clothes. "All right, let's go." Hobert laughed. "You're not going to your death, relax a little." He extended his arm, and Furs naturally linked hers. The moment she linked arms with Hobert, Furs felt as if strength was transmitted from Hobert to her, making her less nervous and bewildered. Taking a deep breath, Furs followed Hobert into the spirit world. At noon, only Helen was left at the dining table in the Lord's Manor. She grumbled, "What's so good about eating outside? How can it compare to the food at the Lord's Manor?" Arriving at the Earl's mansion's living room, Furs smiled and said, "Hello, Uncle." Hello. Christine was very satisfied with the young lady's appearance, attire, and demeanor. Hobert rarely saw his adoptive father smile so happily. Lunch was already prepared, and there were only the 3 of them in the large dining room. Furs was a bit unaccustomed to the servant's service at first, but after a few dishes were served, she got used to it. The atmosphere at the dining table was harmonious. Furs breathed a sigh of relief. Christine was not as fierce as rumored, but rather a gentle gentleman. Indeed, some newspaper reports couldn't be trusted. The conversation during the meal also made Christine very satisfied with Furz's conversation and insights. In his opinion, Miss Furz was more suitable to be Hobert's wife than those superficial noble young ladies. After lunch, the three returned to the living room, but a wooden door had appeared in the middle of the room, with Dophis guarding it. Christine introduced, "Miss Furz, this is my welcoming gift to you." Saying this, he twisted the doorknob and opened the door. Beyond the door was not the living room, but a richly colored, illusory scene. He smiled and said, "This is a traveler's gate, which can link with another door on the North Continent by establishing a mystical connection. I heard Hobert mention that you used to live in Backland. If you get homesick, you can return through this door anytime." Furz was stunned. This. Hobert thought to himself, Christine indeed has a sealed artifact corresponding to a traveler here. Christine continued to explain, "I'll tell Hobert the specific way to establish the link later. You can set an activation incantation. After chanting the incantation, open the door. If you don't chant the incantation, even if you open it, it will just be an ordinary door. This is too valuable." Furz quickly declined, "Uncle, I can't accept it." Hobert, however, smiled and said, "If he gives it to you, just take it." But, Furz glanced at Hobert. "But we are contract spouses, your reward to me is £2,000, and this door, just by hearing its function, must be worth several £1,000s. Hobert and Furz exchanged glances. "Don't worry, it's fine." He simply laughed and said, "It's fine, I've accepted it for you." After chatting for a while longer, Hobert asked Dophis to hire a team of railway exploration and design engineers from Feniport City. He wanted to build a small railway in his territory. Then he asked for a design team, as he wanted to build a resort for nobles to enjoy. After speaking, he handed Dophis the £1,000 he had prepared earlier, as a deposit and for related expenses. If there was any surplus, it would be left with Dophis's reserve funds for the Baron's mansion in the capital. Furz was secretly a little surprised. Hobert had spent £2,000 in one day. She knew Hobert was wealthy, but she didn't expect him to be so rich. In fact, Hobert also felt a pang of regret, but some money had to be spent. Even if Hobert wasn't doing it to digest the potion, he intended to develop his territory. That meant he would have a base of his own, and that meant more income. After chatting for a while longer, Hobert carried the wooden door and took Furz back to the Lord's manor. Hobert first had the artisan remove the door from Furz's room to the study and replace it with the wooden door he had brought back. Without injecting spirituality while holding the doorknob, it was just an ordinary wooden door. While the door was being replaced, Hobert returned to his room and used travel to go to Backland. After more than an hour of work, Hobert stepped through the void and appeared in Furz's room. "All right, you can try it." The wooden door on the Lord's manor side had already been replaced and cleaned up. Hobert reminded her, "The incantation you chant when you first inject spirituality will be its activation incantation from now on." Furz had already thought of the incantation. She held the doorknob and injected spirituality. Backland. When the wooden door opened, there was a colorful illusion. Furz stepped into it, felt a moment of dizziness, and then saw her friend Hugh's smiling face. At the dinner table, Furz handled Helen's attempts to pry information out of her with ease. She wasn't a naive girl unfamiliar with the world like Audrey, she knew exactly what to say and what not to say. As a best-selling author, she had already fabricated her background and identity that morning, and she deliberately allowed Helen to see through her lies to disrupt the other party's judgment. If Hobert hadn't reiterated before dinner that extraordinary abilities couldn't be used at the table, Helen would have used charm to make Miss Furz like her and confide in her. But Helen could tell that Hobert's statement was less a reiteration and more a warning. Disobeying his intentions could lead to the breakdown of their cooperation. At the end of dinner, Furz wiped her mouth with a napkin. "Hobert told me you are a guest. Since you are my fiancé's guest, I will show you enough respect, but you should know that I am the mistress of this territory." Helen looked at Furz, who had always been so amiable, in surprise. This was a very clear warning. I tolerate you only because you are a guest, but you also need to know who the mistress here is. She suddenly smiled. Is this what being a noble is like? No matter how amiable they appear on the surface, their territorial instinct is very strong deep down. After saying this, Furs threw her napkin on the table and stood up to leave. Although Hobert knew this was Furs's performance, he was still impressed by Furs at that moment. Helen said pitifully, "Your fiancé doesn't welcome me." Hobert, however, smiled. If there was a man with ill intentions around Furs, I would have castrated him long ago. After speaking, he also stood up and left. Helen watched Hobert's retreating figure and muttered softly, "You two are in this together." Hobert brought 2 maids to the courtyard gate and asked them to wait there. Just as Hobert expected, Furs was already waiting in the study. How was it? How was it? Did she suspect me? Hobert smiled, composed, with superb acting skills. I was even scared by you, so of course she was intimidated too. After speaking, he opened the door and gestured for the 2 maids to come in. They are maids the butler found to serve you. They live in the servants' room next to yours. I've already instructed them not to enter your room unless you call them. There's nothing much to do these next few days. You can do whatever you want, go for a stroll, or read magazines in your room. Furs nodded, understanding Hobert's hint that it wouldn't matter if she returned to Backland in the next few days. However, thinking of the cold winter in Backland, Furs still preferred the Lord's Manor, which was as warm as spring. She even planned to have Zio experience the warmth brought by the fire dragon, which she considered one of humanity's greatest inventions. She was curious why houses in Backland didn't have such a structure. After Hobert left, Furs took a comfortable bath. When she emerged from the warm bathroom, 2 maids, about 17 or 18 years old, were already waiting outside with new clothes. Furs didn't even need to move, the maids dried the water droplets from her body. Then she returned to her warm bed, comfortably read a magazine for a while, and before sleeping, she couldn't help but sigh, "This is the life I want." The next day, the noise outside woke Furs. She looked at the clock and it was already past 9 in the morning. If it weren't for the noise outside, Furs felt she could have slept longer. She only needed to ring a bell, and a maid would bring her breakfast. While eating breakfast, Furs inwardly warned herself, "I can't be too indulgent, I'll be very unaccustomed if I'm not a baroness someday." So, after breakfast, she planned to go outside, tour Hobert's territory, and continue playing the role of the baroness. At this moment, Furs noticed that her magician potion actually showed signs of being digested. She thought carefully and understood what was happening. The key to being a magician lies in performance. I am currently playing the Baroness as Furs, so this is a constant performance for me. Another essence of a magician should be not letting the audience discover one's methods, and my performance has already deceived many people, including the residents of the territory and the charming original witch. Therefore, my potion has actually begun to integrate with my spirituality because of this. For Furs, this was definitely an unexpected surprise. She had originally planned to find a circus and work as a magician for a while. With such feedback, Furs's enthusiasm for playing the Baroness increased significantly. After dinner, led by 2 maids, Furs arrived at the front yard, where she finally found the source of the noise. The front yard was bustling with people, and in the center of the yard, there were more than a dozen tables arranged. Behind each table sat a clerk, and in front of the tables, 15 long queues had formed, as if for registration. After registration was completed, someone immediately distributed food nearby. Some large families received a big bag of food, making them overjoyed. Some immediately bowed and thanked the Lord, who sat imposingly in the inner part of the front yard. A small front yard gathered at least 200 or 300 people. People kept leaving and entering, making it extraordinarily lively, and the overall atmosphere was quite cheerful. Furs asked Hobert, who was sitting there like a decoration, "What are they counting?" "You might not imagine it," Hobert replied, "there isn't even the most basic household registration here. I don't even know how many people are in my territory." Furs understood. She smiled. A very clever method, I mean using food distribution to encourage everyone to register voluntarily. She had overheard Hobert's arguments more than once before and never doubted Hobert's intelligence. However, this initiative dumbfounded Helen, who had been woken up early in the morning. It took her a long time to understand what was happening. At the same time, she realized a very serious problem. One of the columns in the household registration was faith, and many people stated that they believed in spirituality and knowledge, which is actually the faith of the Gnostic Society, another image of the original witch. The reason the Gnostic Society had made such a huge investment here was precisely because there were no churches of the Orthodox deities, allowing them to preach openly. If it were elsewhere, members of the Gnostic Society would, of course, not easily reveal their faith, but it was different here. Because many Gnostic Society believers had developed over the past few decades, and there had been no crackdown, the believers had no intention of hiding their beliefs at all. The key was that no one would have thought that someone would come to conduct a population registration. No. Helen immediately realized the seriousness of the problem. She believed she should report it immediately to her superiors. Payne which, Ms. Monica listened to Helen's report, then asked, "Does Baron Hobert know about this?" "He already knows," Helen replied. "When I left, he even told me, the Gnostic Society truly has many followers." If Hobert hadn't been smiling at the time, Helen would have thought he was questioning her. Ms. Monica asked again, "What else did he say?" Helen shook her head. "He didn't say anything else." "It's not a big problem," Ms. Monica said seriously. "I think tonight, at the latest tomorrow, Hobert will draw a bottom line for us. You must report to me immediately then." "Understood." Watching Helen's retreating figure, Ms. Monica smiled. "He's truly an interesting young man. If I were still young, I would be very willing to chat with him openly all night." Furs, who had arrived near the abandoned church, saw Helen riding her horse back to the Lord's manor. However, she was immediately drawn to the scenery before her. "I didn't expect Full Moon Lake to be so beautiful. What a pity. What a pity that it was in such a remote, desolate place, a mountainous region said to have no shipping routes and no one caring about it." Furs thought, if transportation were convenient, this would definitely be a popular tourist attraction. After admiring the scenery, she arrived at the church. The maid began to tell Furs the story of how the Lord had killed 2 lords before, but Furs, who was learning Phonoportese, could only understand the general idea. It was fortunate that she could only understand the general idea. If she had heard the story after several recreations, it would have made her laugh until her stomach hurt. From near the church, one could see the entirety of Hobert's territory. It was said that half of Full Moon Lake belonged to Hobert, as well as the many fertile lands by the lake, a seemingly well-established small town, this relatively gentle small mountain range, and the valley on the other side of the mountain. Furs took a deep breath. "I am the mistress of this land, well, the nominal mistress. No wonder Hobert is so concerned about the affairs of the territory. After seeing this land, I even have the urge to develop it well." At the dinner table that evening, Helen was very well behaved, almost only echoing Hobert and Furs's topics. This made Furs wary. It was a bit abnormal. It wasn't until dinner was nearing its end that Hobert said to Helen, "I really didn't expect that nearly a quarter of the people in the town are your followers." Helen became serious, but in her heart, she greatly admired Ms. Monica, who had already anticipated this in the morning. Hobert continued, "I only have 4 demands. First, I hear that some extremists in the Gnostic Society believe the body is a prison for the spirit, aiming to destroy others' bodies. Such extremists cannot appear in my territory. Second, no foolish blood sacrifices. Third, no forcing others to convert. Fourth, no organizing followers to oppose the Lord's manor. If I find that you violate any of these points, then I'm sorry, you will become my enemies. Do not question my resolve, and do not question or rather, my family's strength." After listening, Helen was a little disbelieving. "Lord, what is your faith?" One must know that the Gnostic Society was a secret organization long blacklisted by the Orthodox churches. If someone else were to report them to the church, Helen wouldn't be worried. However, given Hobert's demonstrated composure and way of doing things, he was clearly not an ordinary noble. Helen was very worried that Hobert, who had some influence in Fenaport, would inform the high-ranking officials of the Earth Mother Church about everything here. At that time, the church might send people to investigate and encircle the followers here. Helen did not know that this place easily caused Beyonders of the Cultivator pathway to lose control. Helen had originally thought this might be an irreconcilable conflict between the two sides. But the four demands Hobert had just stated all seemed to express one meaning: maintain the status quo. Hobert smiled. Of course it's the Earth Mother. Haven't you heard? I am a favored one of the Mother. Helen was a bit dumbfounded. Then how could you? Since he was a follower of an Orthodox church, why would he be so tolerant of heretics, or rather, cultists in the eyes of the Orthodox churches? Hobert continued to smile. You can also relay my next words to your superior exactly as they are. For me, faith is just a tool that can strengthen governance. As long as it's not a faith that harms the spirit and body of my people, as long as it's not a faith that undermines my rule, theoretically, I can accept it. Helen found herself completely captivated by Hobert at that moment. She had to admit, he was the most charming and insightful man she had ever met. The unfortunate thing was that this man had not fallen under the power of charm. After dinner, Helen rushed to report to Ms. Monica that very night. After hearing Helen's words, Ms. Monica was silent for 2 or 3 seconds before saying, "Help me communicate. I want to meet Baron Hobert." Helen was slightly startled, but immediately said, "Yes." By the time she returned to the Lord's manor, it was already late at night. She had no choice but to stand in the courtyard and call Hobert's name twice. After Hobert, clearly awakened from his sleep, replied impatiently, Helen quickly stated her purpose. There was a silence of 1 or 2 seconds in the room before he said, "Let that lady come tomorrow for lunch or dinner. At other times, I still need to continue overseeing household registration." The next day, the household registration count at the Lord's manor continued. News of the Lord distributing grain had spread, and people from some villages spontaneously came to the Lord's manor to register. When they saw the tall, newly magnificent Lord's manor, when they saw the Lord sitting in the courtyard, and when they truly received the grain, they felt again that a new Lord had arrived. A new order was established through such subtle influence. When Ms. Monica arrived at the Lord's manor by carriage with her servants, the registration work had just entered its lunch break, and the clerks had all gone to eat. Hobert and Furs greeted her in the courtyard. Ms. Monica looked at Furs. What a beautiful young lady. Furs was slightly startled. This lady looks less than 30, right? Hobert said she was a sequence 5. Perhaps some Beyonder powers in the middle sequence can grant longevity. After the dishes began to be served, Ms. Monica smiled. I'm very curious what kind of young man can say such inclusive words. These are just some truths. Hobert, of course, knew what she was referring to. For me, what I care about most is actually governance. In a metropolis, rulers have to consider the power of the church. They only dare to think this way, but not say it. Ms. Monica, however, said, "No, I can feel that you are an inclusive ruler, and you haven't regarded me as someone from an evil organization. Perhaps it's because I have a set of governance concepts they cannot imagine." Hobert said, "I believe that witches can actually have another side. For example, a pain witch doesn't necessarily bring suffering to ordinary people. If she brings suffering to some villains, isn't she still a pain witch?" Hobert knew that the pain witch in front of him possessed enough wisdom to understand his words. He continued, "You should also have realized that the church's power comes from Beyonders, but the church's strength and potential depend on the number of its followers. With enough followers, there will be enough fresh blood. Even if Beyonders suffer significant losses, they can be replenished to a certain extent in the shortest possible time. Additionally, whether it's the power generated by faith, the acquisition of information, the accumulation of financial resources, or the establishment of channels, everything will fall into place naturally. Although many religious individuals are unwilling to admit it or think about it this way, the truth is, ordinary people are the key to the church. What the church should be competing for, or is currently competing for, has always been the faith of ordinary people. Monica listened very carefully. The high-ranking members of the Gnostic Society had long held similar concepts, otherwise, they wouldn't have tried every possible way to develop followers. However, before this, none of them had such a clear line of thought. Furs and Helen, on the other hand, felt as if they were hearing a completely new theory, so they found it very novel. Hobert continued, then the crux of the problem arises. Since it's about competing for the faith of ordinary people, the image of the church, or rather, the clergy, among the populace will be crucial. If you always aim to bring suffering, despair, and disaster to the people, they will naturally not believe in your doctrines. If you bring suffering to villains, if you are an image that makes evil despair, if you are a disaster for lawbreakers, your image will undergo a huge change, and people will spontaneously become followers of the Gnostic Society. Helen quickly asked, what about joy? Hobert smiled, isn't it joy to let the people you love experience joy every day? As he spoke, he thought to himself, but doing this seems both exhilarating and cruel. Hobert continued, if countless people come to beg for joy, but you refuse them, your image will also undergo a huge change, won't it? Also, who said joy only refers to joy in the bedroom? Think back to when you were in love. A single gesture or glance from your beloved could stir your emotions. Helen opened her mouth. These words seemed to open up a new line of thought for her. Monica, however, let out a long sigh and then said with a bitter smile, but the existence we believe in is the Terminator who ends everything. Our core philosophy is still to bring an end, to bring the apocalypse, to this world. Her ability to tell Hobert about their faith showed Monica's honesty in this conversation. Hobert maintained his smile. Haven't you noticed? In today's righteous God churches, the deities are deities, and the churches are churches. It's not that the churches have lost their loyalty to the deities, but after the deities went to the astral realm, it's impossible for them to manage the churches down to every detail. Over 1,000 years, the churches have certainly developed a corresponding independence. For us, this is a good thing. Perhaps you've heard this saying, believe in the power of the deities, but do not believe in their benevolence. Why don't you make a separation in terms of your function and philosophy? The deities are deities, the witch church is the witch church, and the Gnostic Society is the Gnostic Society. Leave the matter of ending the world to the deities and the witch church, you just need to do what a church should do. Monica was stunned for a full 10 seconds before saying, your idea is very bold, but it's also spot on. I will go back and seriously consider it. With that, the Pain Witch, without eating a single bite of food, immediately got up to leave. She needed time to quickly digest the concept she had just heard. In the carriage on the way back, she instructed Helen, for now, do not leak today's conversation. Pay attention to Hobert's words and actions, for you, this could be a huge shift in thinking. In the Lord's Manor dining room, the chef was still serving dishes continuously. Hobert, however, held his chopsticks and sighed. The conversation just now always felt like a déjà vu of persuading a streetwalker to turn over a new leaf. Those theories were some ideas that had existed in his mind for a long time. Just like the Rose School, a path filled with curses and malice, couldn't it still be divided into the temperance faction and the hedonist faction? In Hobert's view, this extraordinary world, under the influence of the original deities and the distorting nature of extraordinary characteristics, formed some black and white values. Believing in the Black Knight goddess meant not being able to believe in the Lord of Storms. Believing in the Earth Mother meant not being able to believe in the God of wisdom and knowledge. Hobert had seen too many people who worshipped Sakyamuni while also worshipping Guan Yu. Of course, more worshipped Guanyin but also had a kitchen god statue pasted and door gods on their doors. However, such worship was indeed only suitable for a world where deities exist in the spiritual realm. In this world where deities can influence reality, it is indeed not suitable to simultaneously believe in several deities. But in Hobert's opinion, as long as witches have a positive and upward channel for digesting potions, establishing a church that can be widely accepted by the public is not a problem. Just as the honorific name of the god of war still contains descriptions like, Twilight of all things, and the Lord of Storms honorific also includes, Lord of Calamities, the Black Knight goddess also has the description, Empress of Misfortune and Fear. Hobert deeply felt that some Beyonders were single-minded, always looking for the most effortless and convenient ways to deal with the sense of distortion brought by potions. It's one thing for high-sequence Beyonders with divinity, but the key is that some Beyonders who completely possess the rationality of normal people and have free thoughts will also indulge themselves, gradually lowering their moral standards. If they could put in a little more effort, their image and their situation would be completely different. Hobert's words just now were actually also an outpouring of his inner thoughts. Although he had only recently become a lord, he already had many new ideas. In his view, any power that was beneficial to himself and his subjects was something that could be used. Hobert believed that in the future, his territory should not have only one faith, that of the Earth Mother, as this would make it difficult to control the power of the Church. While thinking, Hobert filled his stomach. After finishing lunch, he realized that a lot of food was left over that afternoon. So Hobert called Philip over. Let those waiting, distribute the extra food to the villagers waiting outside who haven't eaten. He had originally intended to let the villagers waiting outside come in to eat, but in that case, both the butler and the villagers might find it difficult to accept, so he changed his approach. Philip bowed and said, I thank you on behalf of the villagers for your benevolence. Hobert waved his hand, chatted with Furs for a few more sentences, then sat back down in the chair in the courtyard, beginning his afternoon work. That afternoon, Hobert noticed that the eyes and clothing of two villagers seemed a bit off, but he didn't immediately investigate. Instead, he continued to sit there, acting as a mascot. After the registration work concluded in the afternoon, Hobert called Philip, give the workers a day off. Tell them that the funeral for Light Viscount's family is the day after tomorrow, and ask all of them to attend. Philip felt that the Lord's order had a purpose. Although he didn't understand the Lord's intention, he still respectfully agreed. The household registration work continued until Friday morning, basically coming to an end. In the afternoon, Hobert only left 3 tables, which was enough to handle the sparse number of people coming to register. Everyone else began to compile and organize the household registration records. Hobert, meanwhile, was sensing the digestion of his potion. Hobert noticed that after 3 days of household registration, he had used both carrot and stick, but the potion had only been digested by 1/6 to 1/5. This was even with every villager having seen him and received food directly from him. Hobert sighed inwardly. Bestowing favors is indeed not the best way to establish rule. Such methods usually only add icing to the cake. Only by demonstrating one's power is it easiest to establish a recognized rule. Of course, this doesn't mean bestowing favors is useless. Being too martial isn't good either. It's just that there's no need to constantly bestow favors. Occasional favors are enough to show a lord's benevolence. Thinking of this, Hobert suddenly smiled. If it were anyone else, without guidance, they would have to go through continuous trial and error to learn how to be a lord. But I am different. I only need to combine the actual situation with a review of the actions of past emperors, and I can often find a reference. Around 4 p.m., under the guidance of the 3 teachers, the clerks finished their statistics. Hobert sat in his study, reading intently. The 3 teachers who came to submit the statistics stood nervously in front of Hobert's desk, like students who had failed an exam. Hobert flipped through page after page. Although the final statistical report was a bit messy, the information he needed was clearly presented before him. Currently, the territory has a total of 3,367 people, which was 700 or 800 more than Hobert had expected. On the last day, some clerks registered at the front, while others went to the rooms to make tables, ensuring there were always enough forms. Among them, there were over 1,000 able-bodied adults. Hobert roughly estimated that during non-farming seasons, he could mobilize a maximum of 1,200 able-bodied adults for labor and 300 women to provide logistical support. The available manpower far exceeded Hobert's expectations. So, the preliminary preparatory work could begin. As soon as the design blueprints were out, construction would start immediately. Hobert said to the 3 teachers, "It basically meets my requirements." The 3 teachers finally breathed a sigh of relief. Hobert said to the male teacher who had been the most active and contributed the most over the past week or so, "Your name is Conrad, right? Would you like to stay and work in the Lord's manor? I plan to establish a position of household registration knight, to manage household registration for me. In the future, new births and changes in household registration will all be managed by the household registration knight, who will enjoy the corresponding treatment of a knight, but without a fief. He will only receive a salary from the Lord's manor and will be assigned 4 subordinates. Any future projects needed in the territory will require the household registration knight to mobilize the able-bodied adults in the town and various villages." Conrad immediately agreed excitedly. Even without a fief, this was considered entering politics and directly serving the Lord. Another male teacher, though a bit unconvinced, dared not show it in front of the Lord. Moreover, Conrad had indeed worked more and was more responsible than him. Next, Hobert appointed the female teacher as the principal, which made the other male teacher even more unconvinced. However, he found that under the Lord's gaze, he dared not object. Not only that, Hobert also reprimanded this male teacher for his procrastination and extremely improper attitude. The male teacher listened, cold sweat dripping, and quickly knelt to beg for mercy. However, Hobert did not punish him, only telling him to go back and calmly continue teaching. When there was a need for clerks again in the future, he would be called to the Lord's manor, and if he performed well, he would also be given a position. After a combination of carrot and stick, Hobert ended his work for the day. At dinner, Hobert said at the table, "A few guests might arrive tonight. You'd best not go out." Starting from Thursday afternoon, Hobert had successively discovered 3 villagers in disguise coming to register. They thought they had hidden themselves well, even smudging their faces and wearing ragged clothes, but Hobert still noticed that their necks were relatively clean, and they were clearly unaccustomed to the local Fenaport attire. Helen paused slightly, carefully chewing on Hobert's words. Furs, on the other hand, frowned, wondering why guests would come at night. Then she understood that guests was an adjective meant for Helen. Furs asked, "Do you need me to find helpers?" She could call Seal for help. Hobert shook his head, "I can handle it myself." Helen was startled. She could summon helpers. Hobert then instructed Philip and Seal, "No matter what sounds you hear, do not go to my courtyard." After dinner, back in his study, Hobert said to Furs, "I estimate the mercenaries from Backland have arrived. You'd best return to Backland to avoid them for now." Furs smiled. "This might also be one of my trials." Hobert knew this would be the outcome. He handed Furs a revolver. Its ability is to fire bullets that make it difficult for an opponent to concentrate. The side effect is that it's easy to hear some maddening whispers. Be careful. He knew the mercenaries' main target was himself, so even if Furs stayed, there wouldn't be too much danger. Furs took the pistol and nodded seriously. At night, Hobert extinguished the lamp as usual, but he did not sleep. Instead, he held his Tang Dao, sitting cross-legged on the bed, waiting. In the latter half of the night, his spirituality detected someone climbing into the courtyard. Thump! Almost the instant Hobert detected it, the door was immediately crashed open. 2 people, dressed in ruin-style night uniforms, immediately raised their guns towards Hobert's bed. The entire tactical movement from entering the courtyard to entering the door and then attacking was very clean and swift. But the moment they raised their guns, they were drawn to the mural on the wall. They almost simultaneously exclaimed, "What a wonderful landscape!" The monster immediately appeared, delivering its curse. The mercenary who entered first immediately said, "Distortion." He distorted the curse onto a nearby chair, which immediately shattered. Hobert judged this to be a corrupted baron. Both men fired repeatedly, killing the monster, but they had completely lost their previous advantage. The monster disappeared, and Hobert's blade was already close. Fortunately, these two men serving as the vanguard were very skilled and immediately split up to evade Hobert's attack. However, as Hobert attacked, he reached out and grabbed, and the second mercenary who entered the door immediately froze, as if he had forgotten to dodge. The corrupted baron's distortion had not yet been used when Hobert cleanly chopped off the mercenary's head. The corrupted baron was secretly alarmed, his comrade was a sequence 7. And he was killed just like that. Hobert was much more formidable than the intelligence they had gathered indicated. Hobert did not continue to attack the corrupted baron, but instead broke through the window and took the initiative to strike. As he leapt out, an uncontrolled stone was thrown towards the crowd, uncontrolled. Bang! A muffled gunshot, in the darkness, hit the uncontrolled stone, and sent it flying into the sky. Only one mercenary within the range was affected, but there was no loss of control. He simply found it difficult to recover his combat strength for the next few tens of seconds due to the uncontrolled stone's influence. Hobert glanced around, already realizing there were 5 enemies in the courtyard. Furz's door was also kicked open, and there seemed to be figures flickering inside. There were a total of 8 enemies, one had already been dealt with, leaving 7. Weakening. Although the uncontrolled stone did not achieve its intended effect, Hobert still used his combo. The 5 enemies in the courtyard were weakened to varying degrees. At the same time, a solemn voice said, "Corrosion is prohibited here." The opponents, of course, knew that corrosion was an area of effect skill, and there were several of them while Hobert was alone, making this skill extremely advantageous for Hobert. The other mercenaries also drew their pistols and aimed at Hobert. Hobert already had a basic understanding of his enemies. The captain was a punishment knight, and the vice-captain should be the corrupted baron who had just emerged from the house. The one with the incredibly accurate gunmanship just now should be a pyromaniac. This was the main combat force of the mercenary team, and the other 3 members should all be sequence 8, whose primary method was auxiliary attacks with revolvers. As the punishment knight issued the prohibition, Hobert had already understood the enemies in this battle, and at the same time, he spread his arms as if embracing the sun, divine light. A huge pillar of light descended, enveloping the pyromaniac and 2 sequence 8 beyonders. After a dazzling pillar of light, the pyromaniac retreated somewhat disheveled behind the corrupted baron. The hair and clothes of the 2 sequence 8 beyonders were ignited by the high temperature, their pistols fell to the ground, and they stood stunned for a full 2 seconds before seemingly remembering to roll on the ground to extinguish the flames on their bodies. The punishment knight and the corrupted baron exchanged glances. He's not easy to deal with. Helen, who was watching the commotion from a distant rooftop, was startled. Is Hobert a Beyander of the Sun Pathway? He doesn't seem like it. She didn't plan to help immediately but decided to observe for a while before deciding whether to intervene. The punishment knight quickly said, "Prohibition here." Hobert reached out and grabbed at him, and the punishment knight forgot what he was about to, prohibition. Then Hobert attacked the 2 sequence 8 beyonders who were rolling on the ground, forcing the corrupted baron and the pyromaniac to come to their rescue. The corrupted baron had already completed the process of bribe during the previous lull, weakening. However, a black barrier appeared around Hobert's body, blocking both the weakening and the pyromaniac's fireball. Just as he was about to kill a sequence 8 Beyander with a single strike, the punishment knight, covered in the light of dawn, rushed over at an extremely fast speed. Both the corrupted baron and the pyromaniac breathed a sigh of relief. According to their plan, the punishment knight's charge was comparable to a rapidly moving steam train, and Hobert would surely dodge, thus saving the sequence 8 Beyander. But unexpectedly, Hobert had no intention of dodging. After plunging his knife into the heart of the sequence 8 Beyander on the ground, he was sent flying by the punishment knight's impact. He directly knocked down a courtyard wall, and bricks and stones flew everywhere in an instant. The 3 were about to continue their encirclement, but Hobert strangely appeared among them, dropping a stone, uncontrolled. Hobert used flash, again, moving out of the attack range of the uncontrolled stone. Invisible black ripples spread out. The pyromaniac and the corrupted baron struggled to resist the loss of control, while the punishment knight was affected by both, weakening, and, uncontrolled, unable to use extraordinary abilities for 2 or 3 seconds. Hobert flashed in front of the Sequence 8 Beander, who was initially affected by the uncontrolled stone, and with a swift move of his knife, he dealt with the opponent. Then, taking advantage of this lull, he grabbed at the punishment knight, stealing the ability of exile. He grabbed at the corrupted baron, stealing the ability of distortion. He grabbed at the pyromaniac, stealing the ability of burning wall. Hobert then continued to attack the weakened enemies, summoning a lightning strike to attack the pyromaniac. The corrupted baron stretched out his hand, only to find that his distortion could not be used. Imprisonment. A layer of amber-like liquid appeared around the descending lightning strike. The punishment knight was imprisoning the lightning strike. Approximately half of the lightning strike was imprisoned, and the remaining half struck the pyromaniac, who was in a state of weakening and uncontrolled, rendering him essentially incapacitated for a short period. Helen, watching the battle from the rooftop, muttered to herself, "The second, no, the third magical item. Carrying so many magical items, isn't he afraid of the negative effects stacking up?" Hobert then summoned wind blades to fiercely attack the corrupted baron, who dodged clumsily. The punishment knight seized the opportunity. Prohibition here. Hobert. Exile. The punishment knight retreated out of the courtyard, unable to resist. The Sequence 5 level, Exile, once again interrupted the punishment knight's prohibition. Hobert sneered, feeling that his move was incredibly timely. These remaining 2 scumbags were no match for him. He turned to use the ability of the psychic wine glass to accelerate the precipitation of the extraordinary characteristic of the killed Sequence 8 Beander. This thought lasted only 2 or 3 seconds before Hobert immediately realized, was my brain kicked by a donkey? The punishment knight, covered in the light of dawn, had already taken this opportunity to kick him. This time, his strength was even greater, and Hobert was sent spinning and flying. Even with the blessings of the living corpse Spoon's steel skin and the corrupted baron's robust physique, one of Hobert's ribs was broken. Flying in midair, Hobert suddenly understood that it was the arrogance ability from bribe that had made him arrogant and led him to make the most error choice. Seizing this moment, the punishment knight said, "Prohibition here." However, Hobert used flash again, appearing in front of the punishment knight. The force of the punishment knight's kick just now was not small. Hobert, who was supposed to hit the wall, instead crashed into the punishment knight. The punishment knight seized the opportunity, grabbed Hobert's arm, and slammed him hard onto the ground. PFF'd. Only a paper figure remained in front of the punishment knight. Hobert used paper figure substitute to break free, and at the same time, he once again interrupted the punishment knight's prohibition. While the battle in the yard was full of twists and turns, gunshots also rang out in Furz's room. Hobert wasn't worried about the fight over there. The enemy would at most send one Sequence 7 to deal with Furz, and she and Zio still had that enchantable revolver, so there wouldn't be too much danger. At this moment, the punishment knight realized that during the previous battle, they had 3 times seemingly had a chance to kill Hobert, but Hobert had turned the situation around each time. It could be confirmed that Hobert had many magical items on him, making him difficult to kill in a short time. The punishment knight made a decisive decision: retreat. It wasn't that he lacked the determination to defeat Hobert, but rather that they had lost the advantage of a sneak attack, and most crucially, Hobert himself was much stronger than reported in their intelligence. At this point, prolonged fighting was not the best option. The punishment knight noticed that the corrupted baron's condition was not very good. If they continued to fight, the corrupted baron would also be injured. It would be safer to find an opportunity to attack again after fully understanding Hobert's capabilities. These mercenaries were all people who had been on extraordinary battlefields, unlike the Beyonders of the Tamara family in Backland who were accustomed to bullying the weak and fearing the strong. After the punishment knight ordered a retreat, the corrupted baron grabbed the pyromaniac who was lying on the ground with one hand, and then carried the sequence 8 whose flames had been extinguished but whose consciousness had not fully recovered. Hobert immediately made a gesture of embracing the sun, sacred. At the same time, the punishment knight threw a punch, death. This punch was unavoidable, so Hobert simply channeled his spirituality into the traveler's blade, death. He wanted to exchange injuries with the punishment knight. Both of them struck each other's chests. The punishment knight had a rib broken and staggered back 2 steps. Hobert was knocked flying out again, a section of his chest caved in. The death recorded was still significantly different from a true death. Under the cover of the punishment knight, the corrupted baron jumped out of the yard with his 2 teammates. Whoosh! Hobert's injuries prevented him from using flash in time, and he knocked down another courtyard wall. By the time he stood up from the pile of bricks and stones, the enemy had already escaped some distance. Heal. The injury on Hobert's chest healed at a visible rate, then he soared into the air, pursuing the enemy in a low flight. The punishment knight's retreat was beyond Hobert's expectation. In his opinion, the punishment knight's advantage had not been lost, and his retreat was enough to show his caution. Such an enemy was the most difficult to deal with, so Hobert planned to leave as many of the punishment knight's helpers as possible. Seeing the 4 people fleeing, Hobert immediately said, "Lightning strike." At the same time, the punishment knight also noticed Hobert catching up, "No flying here." As the lightning strike fell, Hobert also dropped from midair. He saw the punishment knight quickly unroll a scroll, and a brilliant halo appeared in midair, blocking the lightning strike for the corrupted baron. Hobert sighed. A mercenary squad leader couldn't possibly be without magical items. The reason he hadn't used them before was simply that he judged it wasn't the best time to use them yet. With no gains, Hobert quickly returned to the yard. He went to Furz's room and saw 2 figures, one tall and one short, as well as the corpse lying on the ground. The shorter figure smiled. "I didn't expect Fenaport to be so dangerous." Hobert smiled. "The king offered such a high bounty that I'll be their hunting target until I become a demigod." I suddenly have a good idea. Secretly become a demigod, and wait for them to deliver themselves to my doorstep. As Hobert spoke, he used the psychic wine glass's ability to gather the corpses at the door and accelerate the extraction of extraordinary characteristics. The Beander killed by Furz and Zio yielded an extraordinary characteristic of a barbarian. Hobert collected all the extraordinary characteristics and handed the barbarian's extraordinary characteristic to Zio and Furz. "This is your spoils of war, but you don't need it. I'm willing to buy it for 600 pounds. Hobert looked at Zio. "It can also be converted into half an Inquisitor's extraordinary characteristic." Furz was slightly taken aback. "Can't it be converted into an astrologer's extraordinary characteristic?" Hobert thought to himself, "Just wait a little longer, your teacher will bring the materials to your doorstep." He said, "It can. I just noticed that Zio's potion seems to be almost digested." "It's already digested," Zio smiled. "All right, help me convert it into Inquisitor's extraordinary materials. After I prepare for a few more days, I'll pay you the other 600 pounds, and Furz's 300 pounds. Furz, however, shook her head. "You were mainly the one who killed the enemy just now. This spoil of war should belong to you." Zio didn't continue the topic. She already had a plan. "At least give Furz 200 pounds. She said. "The greatest credit goes to this handgun." Zio reluctantly handed it to Hobert. If I wanted to buy it. 1,400 pounds. Hobert immediately quoted a very favorable price. Generally speaking, Sequence 7 level magical items have a premium ranging from 300 to 600 pounds. The price Hobert gave only had a premium of 200 pounds, and the key was that after being sealed by the country of disorder, the revolver's negative effects were no longer very severe. Zio nodded and began to calculate her savings. She had obtained the Sequence 7 potion formula from the masked man, so she no longer needed to purchase it. Including tonight's gains, even after promotion, she would still have a few £100 in savings, so she could consider saving money or borrowing Furz's money to buy this handgun. Just then, noisy footsteps came from outside the yard, and Zio immediately left using the traveler's gate. Hobert came to the yard. It was Philip and Seal with the footmen, armed with sticks or kitchen knives, coming to support their lord. Seeing the scarred yard, they were amazed at what had happened here just now. "Take these 4 corpses out and bury them," Hobert commanded. "Tomorrow, we'll repair the courtyard wall again, and fix the window in my room. Today, I'll stay with Miss Furze." Helen, outside the courtyard gate, rolled her eyes and thought, "Tisk, still in the mood for intimacy." Seeing that the battle was over, she turned and left. Helen had just witnessed Hobert's strength, and only then did she understand why Ms. Monica said she couldn't kill Hobert. She truly couldn't. Even Ms. Monica might not be able to kill this young man. After the footmen took the bodies away for burial, the yard fell silent again. Inside the house, Furze reluctantly said, "I'm going back to Backland." The room in Backland was so cold, she really didn't want to go back. Hobert smiled. "The bed is big enough for 2 people, no problem." Hobert lay on his bed, unable to sleep for a long time. The battle just now was too fast and intense, and the enemy's main force had escaped, which would certainly be a hidden danger in the future. He recalled the intelligence provided by Harvey Hayden. The ones who ambushed him tonight should be the Cold Knight squad, and the other 2 mercenary squads should have already arrived. The level of these battle-hardened mercenary squads should be similar. As long as an ambush or assassination fails, they will immediately retreat and wait for an opportunity. In fact, this is not just about waiting for a new opportunity, but also about putting immense psychological pressure on the target, making them constantly expend energy on defense. Hobert believed that he should take the initiative. Even if he couldn't find the enemy's hideout, he couldn't let them live too comfortably. As for the tactical issues of dealing with future mercenary attacks, Hobert was not worried, because today, in order to integrate the ocean pendant into his fighting style, he did not immediately use the order wood, nor did he use the psychic wine glasses ability, which consumes a great deal of spirituality. Therefore, Hobert's full strength had not been exposed. When the Cold Knight squad attacked him again, they would find that the tactics they had studied for a long time could not effectively harm Hobert. As he thought, Hobert finally felt sleepy. Unfortunately, Furze ultimately returned to Backland. In Hobert's half-sleep, half-wake state, he smelled the lingering fragrance on the quilt and fell into a deep sleep. "Wake up." Furze returned to the Lord's Manor early. After living there for a few days, she felt that Backland was an ice cave. Hobert yawned, stunned for a few seconds, and only came back to his senses after a while, never expecting that he would have a day where he was woken up by the usually lazy Furze. Indeed, he had to get up early today. Hobert returned to his room and changed his clothes. As the winter sun just rose, he took Furze and walked with heavy steps towards Light Viscount's family cemetery. On the way, they met many people coming to attend the funeral. Some were residents of the town, some had set off from their villages before dawn to get there, and some were even people not from Hobert's territory. Previously, Philip and others had hastily buried the Viscount's family. Yesterday, the remains had been exhumed and reinterred in freshly made coffins. The cemetery was already packed with people, 3 layers deep inside and out, but the scene was solemn. No one spoke loudly, everyone quietly watched as the new lord and lady slowly approached with heavy steps. When Hobert and Furze arrived, the funeral officially began. Since there was no bishop or priest from the Earth Mother Church, Philip presided over the funeral, and the new Lord Hobert delivered the eulogy. Hobert first expressed his respect for Light Viscount's family, then recounted how difficult life had been for the residents of the territory over the past 6 years, deprived of the Lord's protection. When he spoke of this, Hobert choked up several times, which brought a chorus of weeping from the crowd. Indeed, the previous 6 years had felt like living in hell. They toiled ceaselessly, but the harvest from the fields was still not enough to pay taxes, so they could only use their household poultry and land to offset taxes, and their lives grew poorer and poorer. Helen, observing from a distance, didn't know what expression to make in the face of such a scene. She almost didn't recognize that the person with red-rimmed eyes and two tears was Hobert. Helen thought to herself, he absolutely has dissociative identity disorder. Last night he was so ruthless, but today he's acting so convincingly, it's like two different people. At this point, Hobert changed the subject, talking about how he avenged Light Viscount's family, about the benevolent policies he implemented, and sketching a beautiful blueprint for the future. Hobert promised, as Light Viscount's successor, he would inherit Light Viscount's virtues, make this territory even better, and make the people's lives happier. Light Viscount could now rest in peace. Driven by Hobert's words, the people attending the funeral seemed to see hope, and they all lamented that all the darkness had passed. After Hobert's eulogy concluded, the coffins of Light Viscount's family were successively carried into the tomb. The tomb was sealed, everyone offered flowers, and after a few minutes of silent mourning, the funeral ended. On the way back to the Lord's manor, Hobert felt that everyone's attitude towards him had noticeably changed. From simple fear to reverence now. Hobert also felt that the potion in his body had digested quite a bit more, even more than during the household registration process. This made him sigh in his heart. Actually, Light Viscount wasn't such a brilliant lord, otherwise, he wouldn't have died so tragically. It's just that the past 6 years were so hard that everyone developed a deep nostalgia for the days of Light Viscount, and thus Light Viscount became a brilliant lord. Fortunately, I have the concept of inheriting legitimacy. I used this funeral, leveraging everyone's nostalgia for Light Viscount, to transfer legitimate governance to myself. This way, both legally and in the hearts of the people, I am the unshakable lord of this territory. Life had to go on, but the people of this territory felt more confident than before, because they were ruled by a new lord, no longer by a group of unreasonable bandits. Whether in production or daily life, they felt more secure than before. Soon, Helen also felt this. While surprised by the effect of Hobert's 2 tears, she immediately planned to report Hobert's words and actions to Ms. Monica. For Helen, whose political acumen was not very high, it was almost like hypnosis people with extraordinary abilities. Furs, who was by Hobert's side, also decided that she would write a book about a baron who built a poor territory into a beautiful and prosperous one. There was no other way. Hobert kept providing her with material, so she didn't have to worry about her new book lacking a subject. After hearing Furz's idea, Hobert decided to sponsor the Baroness's career. As long as you can write it, I can't help you with Ruin, but here in Fenaport, I will definitely contact the country's largest publisher to publish your new book. He was just worrying about how to promote his territory in the future and had forgotten about the writer lady by his side. From now on, you will stay by my side and understand all my policies, Hobert instructed. The new book needs to be fast. It's best if it's finished just as everything in the territory is being built. Furs scratched her head and smiled. In reality, she only had this intention. The previous book, based on Hobert as a lawyer, was only 1/3 written, and the new book would have to be written, when the opportunity arises. But seeing Hobert's happy expression, she didn't have the heart to tell him the truth. She could only agree for now and was pulled by Hobert to the main hall to observe him handling government affairs and gather material. After the main hall of the Lord's Manor was repaired, Hobert conducted all official business there. He first called Philip. The next step is to repair the church on the mountain. We cannot stop, we must continue building. One more chapter. Hobert had mature political economy concepts. Investment in construction could not stop for a moment. Since this poor and remote place was difficult to attract outside investment, the Lord would continuously invest. Hobert was prepared to spend the more than £9,000 he had saved, which was equivalent to over 11,000 gold leathers, first. If it wasn't enough, he still had gold and so many extraordinary characteristics. In short, he would keep investing and simultaneously improve the economic situation of the territory. Through his observations during this period, Hobert found that the pollution from the lake was similar to Bishop Simpson's description. Now that he had the ocean pendant, he planned to explore the lake in the next day or two. Philip reminded him, many building materials in the territory are running low and need to be purchased elsewhere. Hobert nodded, go call Wayne. While Wayne was being summoned, Hobert went to the study for a few minutes, then returned with an exquisite sword in hand. He handed the sword to Seal, you did a good job on the errand. This is your reward. Hobert was referring to Seal's excellent handling of the task of calling people to the Lord's manor during the household registration. Seal happily took the sword with both hands, thank you for the Lord's reward. Hobert then said, from now on, you are my head guard. Organize 7 or 8 helpers to take turns standing guard at the gate of the Lord's manor. Seal immediately knelt to show his loyalty. Rise, Hobert smiled, your first mission as head guard is to go around the town and all the villages, warning the villagers that bandits have recently infiltrated the area. If they see any unfamiliar faces, they should report it to the Lord's manor immediately. If it is confirmed to be a bandit, the Lord's manor will give a reward of no less than 10 silver solely to the person who reports it. After all, this was Hobert's territory. As long as the villagers in the territory were mobilized, the 3 mercenary teams would not dare to act openly. Then, if they wanted to launch an attack again, they would have to rush at least 20 to 30 li to reach the Lord's manor. Yes. Seal, receiving the order, left the main hall with a proud look, holding his sword. Soon, Wayne arrived in the main hall. Hobert said, I have some dried fruits that need to be sold, and the territory also needs to purchase some building materials. I need someone to help me run these errands. Are you willing to accept this assignment? You will continue to run your boat, and as long as it doesn't delay the Lord's manor's expenses, you can come to the Lord's manor every week to collect a salary. Wayne quickly said, it is my honor to serve you. Hobert nodded, I will assign you an assistant and a clerk. The assistant will help you pilot the steamboat, and the clerk will be responsible for keeping accounts. Depart once the personnel have been assigned. Watching Wayne leave, Hobert told Roy, who was standing at the entrance of the main hall, to have Philip arrange personnel for Wayne and to call the household registration knight, who had just been in theft yesterday. Conrad was currently working in the Lord's manor and arrived in the main hall within a minute or two. Hobert said, although the household registration work is over, your work has just begun. The clerks who previously made records should not be dismissed yet, they will be needed later, and they are temporarily under your command. Your first task is to inventory the shops in the town. If any have already closed down, buy them in my name. Roy will follow behind you to pay. Those whose owners cannot be found will be confiscated. If they are still in business, make a record next to the corresponding household registration to confirm ownership. He paused and then said, next, you need to survey the residential houses in the town and register them in the relevant household records. Ownerless houses will all be confiscated. After completing these tasks, you will also need to measure the land around the town and in the villages, and conduct relevant land ownership registrations. At the same time, you must explain one thing to the town residents and villagers. From now on, any land transactions must be reported to the Lord's manor to be legally effective, otherwise, I will not recognize the transaction as valid. As Hobert spoke, Conrad took notes. Although he didn't quite understand the Lord's purpose in doing this, he just had to follow instructions. After issuing several decrees in a row, Hobert drank a cup of tea and rested for a while. Furs, who was taking shorthand nearby, took the opportunity to ask, what is the purpose of registering land transactions at the Lord's manor? She always felt that Hobert had a significant plan regarding this matter, but she didn't quite understand what he was planning. Of course, it's to indirectly gain ownership of all the land in the territory. Hobert smiled, legally speaking, all the cultivated land in the territory is my private property, merely lent to the common people for cultivation, which is why they must pay taxes. However, this legal principle cannot be stated openly, it can only be made known to the common people indirectly. Furs frowned, these legal principles seem a bit heartless. Sometimes, to maintain rule, one must be heartless, Hobert said sternly, only then can power be concentrated to the greatest extent to accomplish things that are difficult for individuals to achieve. And if it's a scattered mess, relying only on individual strength to carry out infrastructure construction, that is an impossible task. All right, Furs smiled, it seems I'm not suited for politics. She then asked, what do you want so many shops for? I went to the town the day before yesterday, and the town residents have been exploited for 6 years, they have no money to buy anything at all. That's why I want to acquire shops, and that's why I want to keep building. Hobert smiled, when everyone has money, they will have the desire to spend. I will then reopen the shops I acquired earlier, control prices, or rent them out cheaply to individuals, and the market will quickly prosper. However, I plan to undertake large-scale renovations, converting them into hotels, inns, and restaurants. Once the town prospers, tourists are sure to flock in. Furs thought to herself, this is very difficult. At least Furs saw no hope, but she didn't want to dampen Hobert's enthusiasm, so she didn't voice her true thoughts. She decided to do her best to help Hobert achieve this goal. Even if it wasn't achieved, it didn't matter, they had tried. South Continent, Southern West Bayland, Hode's copper mine. Elliot and other family members had waited by the roadside early today to welcome the family elder who was coming to inspect. Around 9 o'clock, they finally saw a convoy consisting of 3 carriages. The convoy slowly drove closer and stopped in front of Elliot and the others. Elder Calvin descended from the middle carriage. My goodness, why does Hode's copper mine have so many wooden houses? That's where the slaves live, Elliot explained. Living in wooden houses helps them maintain their physical strength. Although everyone knew that Elliot was a follower of the Creator, the copper mine was, after all, a family industry, so the Creator's instructions still needed some disguise. Elder Calvin was here to inspect the operation of the copper mine. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, the inspection process officially began. They toured all morning and had lunch together. In the afternoon, Calvin called Elliot to the room prepared for him for a private conversation. Calvin got straight to the point, we now need the Creator's help. Thank you all for your votes, the extra chapter is delivered as promised. Calvin said, to retaliate against our previous ambush, the Rose School has sent many forces to Crowley City and is investigating us. If this continues, our cooperation with the Fursac people will be exposed sooner or later. So the Elder Council plans to ambush the Rose School again, but this ambush will never be as smooth as the last one. We suspect that they might be able to invite a disciple of silence or even an angel to Crowley City at any time, so we want to request the help of the Creator. Elliot was slightly stunned. Wait a moment, I'll go back and pray to the Creator. After dealing with government affairs, Hobert returned to his study to catch up on sleep, and Furs also returned to her room to organize her thoughts for her new book. In a daze, Hobert heard someone praying in the country of disorder. He yawned, locked the door, and entered the country of disorder. Sitting on the Iron Throne, Hobert saw the star representing Elliot expanding. What happened at the copper mine again? Hobert extended his spirituality and heard Elliot relay Calvin's words. An angel. Hobert's first reaction was a bit timid, but then he thought that he could summon 2 angel-level monsters, and he felt that this was an opportunity to show the power of the Creator. It's just that those monsters don't obey his command and will attack indiscriminately. He had to choose the battlefield carefully, otherwise many innocent ordinary people would die. Considering that the head of the Bach family would also not allow an angel from the Rose School to descend into the city, there was quite a bit of room for maneuver. At the very least, entangling the opponent's angel would not be a problem. There was no problem with the strength, but the way the other party invited him was too disrespectful to the Creator. So Hobert said to Elliot, I will only help my favored ones and my believers. South Continent, Hode's copper mine. After Elliot heard the Creator's reply, he was first excited, I am the Creator's favored one, so he is willing to help me. But then, Elliot was a little helpless. Although he already knew that the family's curse had nothing to do with the Rose School, the 2 sides had been killing each other for so many years that they had long since developed hatred. So Elliot was actually hoping that the Creator could provide some help, but he then thought that Calvin's invitation was indeed a bit hasty. After thinking about the Creator's reply again, Eliot understood the Creator's meaning. He immediately went back to convey the Creator's answer to Calvin. Calvin apparently expected it. The Patriarch promised that we could offer all the spoils of war as remuneration. Eliot smiled and said, "Will the Creator be interested in these things?" Don't forget, the Creator was willing to accept sacrifices before only because I am his favored one. Calvin was a bit troubled. Then what should we do? Of course, we should devoutly believe in the Creator, Eliot said. Even if we don't believe in the Creator, it is basic courtesy for the Patriarch to ask the Creator for help. Calvin thought for a moment. I will inform the Patriarch. Then he asked, haven't you finished digesting the briber potion? Why haven't you advanced yet? No potion. Ask the Creator to bestow it. Eliot smiled bitterly. I really feel bad always troubling the Creator with these small matters. Calvin smiled. Of course it's not troubling the Creator. Doesn't the Creator also have other favored ones? Or perhaps other favored ones have the corresponding main ingredients ready to be sold? Eliot thought about it, and it was indeed the case. Just like the gold sacrificed to the Creator before, the Creator didn't need gold, it must have been the Creator's favored ones who needed it. I can try to pray to the Creator, he said. If other favored ones have the corresponding potion, can I buy it with gold from the copper mine? As the person in charge of this copper mine, Eliot's income, although very considerable, had not yet reached the accumulation needed to purchase a Sequence 6 potion. Calvin sighed and said, currently, among the family's 3 industries, only the Hode's copper mine is profitable. In a few days, the family will also send a group of young disciples to learn your management experience. As a reward for you, you can use the copper mine's funds to purchase the main ingredients for the corrupted Baron potion, or its extraordinary characteristic. Before, the Bach family was used to doing business that involved killing people. Where would they have any experience in managing mines? Another copper mine and a timber farm were already basically in a state of shutdown. Eliot only found out after asking that they were too harsh on the slaves, which resulted in an outbreak of plague and widespread death among the slaves, and new slaves could not be replenished immediately, so they had to suspend operations. This made Eliot grateful that he had the Creator's reminder, otherwise the performance of the Hode's copper mine would not have been so outstanding. Fenaport Kingdom, Jeffrey Town. It took a whole morning, but Hobert's bedroom window was finally replaced, which gave him a comfortable place to take a nap. After waking up, he heard someone praying in the country of disorder again. Upon arriving at the country of disorder again, he found that the person praying was Eliot again. Hobert extended his spirituality. Great Creator, Elder Calvin has left. Thank you for your reminder. The slaves, eating coarse grains and living in wooden houses, maintained sufficient physical strength and resistance, so there was no plague or large number of deaths. There's also a small matter to trouble you with. Thanks to your help, my briber potion has been digested. I wonder if any of your other favored ones have a corrupted Baron potion or its extraordinary characteristic for sale. I will pay the corresponding remuneration in gold. Withdrawing his spirituality, Hobert looked at the shimmering stone platform. He did indeed have a corrupted Baron's extraordinary characteristic, which came from the contribution of the Tamara family. This extraordinary characteristic was of no use to him at the moment, but he could sell it to Eliot using his alt account. However, he would have to wait until evening, as the Creator wouldn't care too much about this level of transaction. It would certainly be just to relay a message for a favored one. Hobert found that observing Mr. the Fool's actions recently had been very helpful in how to be a good evil god. After dinner, Hobert used the method of praying to himself to indicate that he had the corrupted Baron's extraordinary characteristic, asking for 800 ounces of gold, worth about £3,000. Unexpectedly, upon entering the country of disorder, Hobert first saw the star representing Raft expanding. Extending his spirituality, he heard Raft say, "Great Creator, I offer you a treasure buried deep beneath Backland." The family declined precisely because of this treasure. The treasure Raft spoke of was, of course, the ruin where Medici lingered. Raft concluded his prayer, saying, "Your humble servant only hopes to obtain an extraordinary characteristic of a corrupted baron and a chaos instructor from within. These extraordinary characteristics are my family's legacy. The evil spirit inside must still be guarding more valuable treasures. If you are interested, I will lead you near that treasure, and I will offer everything there to you." Withdrawing his spirituality, Hobert smiled. He felt bad about using Raft as a pawn again, but why was Raft offering himself to him? If Raft was willing to explore, then harvesting the extraordinary characteristics there could be considered. Although Medici's evil spirit could be connected to Adam, Hobert remembered that when Medici left Backland, he did not take the extraordinary characteristics from the ruins. In other words, even if Medici was crucial to Adam's story, Adam did not need those extraordinary characteristics. And those extraordinary characteristics were a considerable fortune for the pseudo-evil god, Hobert. Even taking them would not attract too much attention from Adam. However, this action had two difficulties. First, it required enough power to intimidate Medici, and considering Medici likely had near demigod strength, this would require using the creator's image and power to intimidate him. This led to a second problem. If the creator's abilities were used in Backland, it would easily attract George III and also draw the attention of some demigods. Therefore, it was impossible for Hobert to go to the ruins himself and then summon his own power. George III could easily corner him in the ruins. But without the creator's power, it would be difficult to intimidate Medici. Those three angel kings and angels who had lived for thousands of years would not be fooled without some genuine strength. If Hobert went alone, he would be like a transport captain, delivering extraordinary characteristics and mystical items to Medici. So Hobert had long thought of meeting Medici, but he had never gone to that ruin. It would be best to harvest those extraordinary characteristics after Medici left and before the church destroyed the place. Now, with Raft acting as the pawn, this plan could be implemented. Perhaps he could even trick Medici into revealing a blasphemy card. Medici now only had his Beander status left, but no matter how high his Beander status was, could it be higher than the country of disorder? And Hobert, sitting on the Iron Throne, even had a good chance of eliminating Medici, but that would be somewhat counterproductive. Even if there was danger, it would be Raft who was in danger. Hobert could completely minimize the risk. After some thought, Hobert deemed it feasible. After considering the specific plan, Hobert said to Raft, "Tell me the detailed situation of that evil spirit." When Raft decided to offer the treasure to the creator, he had a do-or-die mentality. Years of gambling experience had made him accustomed to seizing opportunities and going all in. However, during the waiting period, Raft was still a bit nervous, excited, and also fearful. Nervous about whether the creator would agree. Excited that if he did, he could take those two extraordinary characteristics and leave Backland, having a chance to restore his family's honor. As for fear, it was entirely due to the unknown and the powerful creator. Fortunately, the creator did not make him wait too long. "Tell me the detailed situation of that evil spirit." Raft breathed a sigh of relief, then gathered his spirits and began to recount what he knew about the evil spirit. "So it's him," the creator said. Actually, no matter what Raft said, Hobert would always respond with that, which meant, "I care about that evil spirit, I don't care about the treasure at all." Raft's eyes indeed narrowed. The creator knew that evil spirit. It seemed the family records were true, that evil spirit was originally an ancient powerhouse. "I'm starting to get interested in that treasure," Hobert said in a relaxed tone. "Prepare an altar." Raft prepared an altar as instructed, and then recited the relevant incantation. The two bronze gates suddenly appeared and then quickly vanished. But there was something extra on the altar, something Raft was very familiar with, the black crystal mask that the creator's dependents had lent him before. The simple yet substantial-looking crystal seemed to shimmer with light under the lamp, and on the mask's forehead was the mystical symbol representing the creator, giving the mask a seductive and sacred beauty. The creator's voice once again appeared in Raft's mind, "Lead the way." Yes. Raft put on the mask, checked his tight-fitting clothes, jumped out the window, and ran wildly into the night. Hobert, meanwhile, used this time to sacrifice some mystical items to the country of disorder by offering them to himself. Returning to the country of disorder, Hobert waved his hand, placing the crow-feathered golden-horned evil creature's skull beside the Iron Throne for later use. To deal with the current Medici, the Ox Demon King would be sufficient at most. The other two angel-level monsters could indeed demonstrate the creator's Beander status, but they were difficult to control and might cause an even greater spectacle. Of course, Hobert also knew that if he could avoid using the Ox Demon King, he should; otherwise, the creator, with only a demigod serving him, would lose too much face. Soon, Raft arrived in front of an abandoned small church. He prayed again. "Great Creator, that treasure is below. I have dug several times before, but I have never dug through." At this moment, his vision suddenly blurred. When he recovered, it was pitch black in front of him, and he quickly lit the lantern he had prepared. Under the light, Raft found himself in an ancient ruin. In the surrounding passages, there were metal rods hanging from above, their lower ends carved into candelabras of different creatures. "Inverted candelabras," Raft said excitedly. Over the years, he had read many related books and knew that inverted candelabras were a sign of Fourth Epoch architecture. He realized that he had already entered the ruins. Raft could only describe the creator's method of sending him down as a miracle. This was actually Hobert using a teleportation statue to send him down. Walking forward, Raft saw two black thrones side by side. The two thrones were high, overlooking the entire hall. Behind the thrones was a row of stone doors. Raft, as if attracted by something, immediately saw the two bloody double doors. With the creator's gaze, Raft confidently walked to the door. Just as he was about to push it open, he suddenly felt the surroundings darken, as if a black shadow was rapidly approaching. An unprecedented sense of fear filled Raft's heart. At this moment, Hobert said in a solemn voice, "Medici, it really is you." The black shadow immediately stopped. Raft wanted to laugh out loud at this moment. He first wanted to laugh at the evil spirit in front of him. In the notes left to him by his patriarch grandfather, he was told to be very careful and not to try to deal with that evil spirit by force, as previous family members had suffered losses from doing so. They had to treat the evil spirit in the ruins with the same reverence as a king, because the Pound family no longer had the power to deal with the evil spirit, nor any other means, so they could only gamble that the evil spirit would cooperate. Raft was still very young when he received this notebook and didn't quite understand what it meant. Later, as he gradually grew up, he realized how terrifying the power of this evil spirit was. 2 Sequence 5, 3 Sequence 6, and 2 Sequence 7 individuals, divided into 3 waves, explored and attempted to clear the evil spirit. The third wave even carried a Grade 1 sealed artifact, but they were still annihilated by the evil spirit. This experience was detailed in the notes. The evil spirit was extremely cunning. The main force of the first wave of family members who explored consisted of 1 Sequence 6 and 1 Sequence 7. After exploring for a period, the Sequence 7 returned to report. There was an evil spirit underground, and it was not very difficult to deal with. So, the best among the family, a Sequence 5, led a Sequence 6 and a Sequence 7 to attempt to clear the evil spirit. Not long after, the Sequence 6 returned to report. The evil spirit was about to be eliminated, but support was needed. Only then did the Patriarch feel relieved, allowing the family's heir to take a Grade 1 sealed artifact and led another Sequence 6 to provide support. However, a day and a night passed, and no one returned. Only then did the Patriarch realize he had been tricked. His speculation was written in the notes. Wrote that Sequence 7, who returned to report the first time, was very likely possessed by the evil spirit, luring more family members into the ruins. Immediate that Sequence 6, who returned to report the second time, was very likely deceived by the evil spirit. The Patriarch's notes also speculated, this evil spirit has extremely high intelligence, at least at the demigod level. At this moment, Raft could feel the surprise displayed by this evil spirit. He couldn't help but exclaim, "This is the power of the Creator." Raft also wanted to laugh at himself, wondering why he had hesitated for so long before. He should have offered this treasure to the Creator long ago. Those extraordinary characteristics and sealed artifacts were too low level for the Creator and of no use. As long as he served the Creator well, there was a high probability that the Creator would bestow upon him those sealed artifacts and extraordinary characteristics belonging to the Pound family. While Raft was thinking of laughing, Hobert used the star representing Raft to project his image into the underground ruins. Raft felt a surge of power descend. In mid-air, a throne, seemingly forged from sharp swords, appeared, and a majestic black figure sat upon it. The figure's face was unclear, but it appeared very solid, emitting a black yet sacred light all around. Even in the dark ruins, the black halo was still visible. It was more like a powdery substance than a light. Hobert realized it had been a while since he had descended power through the stars. Now, besides being able to descend more power, his image also seemed much more solid than before, which should be attributed to his advancement. The evil spirit in the ruins was also intimidated by Hobert. It paused for a few seconds inside the stone door before emerging. He was like a black, solid phantom, and it was exceptionally cold around him. The phantom bowed to the Creator, and then Raft heard a sinister voice say, "I told you, he's not Solomon." Then another voice said, "Shut up. Idiot. Now we must show enough respect, or we might die, and that includes you." The sinister voice from before said, "You're the idiot. Have you forgotten? We're already dead." Raft felt the cold brought by the ghost, and was also surprised why this phantom would emit two seemingly contradictory voices. He quickly retreated a few more steps, clearly understanding that he was merely a foil now. The Creator laughed twice with a voice like a great bell. "Your spiritual body remnant has actually merged with others." He was pretending to be unaware, as few people knew that Medici and the other two had died together. At this moment, a third voice emerged from the phantom, "You should know us." The Creator deliberately paused for 2 seconds, Einhorn and Sauron. Medici and the other two were all stunned. It was Einhorn who had spoken just now, and his statement, while appearing to be a declaration, was actually a test. Medici was also a prominent figure in the fourth epic, and the fact that this mysterious existence only knew him didn't mean much. However, this mysterious existence also knew the other two, which was sufficient to prove that the other party was an existence with a long lifespan, whose power had been formidable and well informed for a very long time. If he wasn't powerful, he wouldn't have lived until now. If he wasn't well informed, he wouldn't have guessed who the other two were. But even after the three of them racked their brains, they still couldn't guess who this terrifyingly powerful existence before them was. Even if the Red Priest was good at finding weaknesses, with the country of disorder blocking them, they couldn't see through the Creator's true nature at all. They would not doubt the Creator's power because of this, as it sufficiently demonstrated the Creator's strength. Medici asked in a very polite tone, "May I ask who you are?" "You don't need to know." Even Einhorn and Sauron, who liked to contradict, didn't mock Medici. Being rebuked by a godlike existence, what's the big deal? Some people wish to be rebuked like this but don't get the chance. Einhorn also asked in a very polite tone, "How should we address you?" Raft immediately cleared his throat. "This is the Creator." The Creator. Medici and the other two fell silent, they had still never heard of him. But they could guess that the one who had destroyed their clones before was the Creator. It was reasonable that the Creator would protect this descendant of Tudor, who looked like an idiot. After all, they could sense that the Creator should be of the Black Emperor or Judge sequence. However, the angels of the Black Emperor and Judge sequences they knew were only a few, and they even knew an outer god, but none could be associated with the Creator before them. At this moment, they all thought of an existence they had learned about from Raft. Sauron tentatively asked, "Could you be Emperor Rosal?" The Creator snorted coldly, and suddenly a surge of distortion power descended, actually twisting the evil spirit into 3 smaller evil spirits in volume. Of course, there were still shadows connecting them, but they truly felt that for the first time in over 1,000 years, they had genuinely separated. The Creator asked, "Who asked the question just now?" 2 evil spirits answered in unison, "Sauron." Soren. Immediately after, their surging chaos power descended. Aha! As a malevolent spirit, Soren, who had long lost the ability to feel pain, let out a mournful cry of agony. Medici and Einhorn could also feel Soren's pain and fear through their connection. Indeed, it was a power that could extinguish them at any moment. They had thought that over 1,000 years of malevolent spirit life had made them forget fear, but now they realized that they had not forgotten. It was simply that for over 1,000 years, there had been nothing to make them afraid. Now they truly wanted to congratulate each other on rediscovering the feeling of having flesh and blood. If it were other Beyonders of the demigod level, Hobert could also defeat them with the high sequence of Country of Disorder, but it wouldn't be so easy to form such a clear phenomenon of the upper suppressing the lower. The current phenomenon exists because Medici's power as a malevolent spirit is actually greater than their power as Beyonders. They possess an extremely high sequence, and even today, they are still the god of war. Similar to Hobert's situation, although their strength doesn't reach demigod level, their sequence compensates for the lack of strength, which allows them to remain fearless when facing demigod-level opponents who have undergone a qualitative change. However, this also has a huge drawback. As soon as they encounter an opponent with a greater advantage in terms of sequence, all their advantages will vanish. Therefore, Hobert could even use the already abstract distortion power to completely flatten them like clay, without any power to resist. 3 or 4 seconds later, the painful sensation for Soren finally disappeared, but he still took over 10 seconds to recover slightly. Thank you for your mercy. The 3 smaller malevolent spirits unconsciously bowed slightly to the Creator, which reminded them of how they felt when facing Solomon, and a phrase appeared in their minds simultaneously. Do not test God. Even the former Angel King and angels cannot violate such a precept. Indeed, after Einhorn's probing, Soren's question just now was another test. If the Creator admitted to being Emperor Rosal, then they would understand the identity of the one before them. If the Creator spoke another name, whether they had heard it or not, it would mean the Creator was uneasy, and only someone uneasy would reveal their identity. That would indicate that the Creator might be like them, bound or sealed by various shackles. If either of these two situations occurred, it would make them feel contempt. But the Creator's reaction was like that of a god, temperamental. Medici asked respectfully, "Noble the Creator, can you completely separate us?" "Yes, but then you will completely disappear." Actually, Hobert was unsure if he could achieve this. Medici asked again, "Can you allow us to leave here? We are willing to offer sacrifices that might interest you." Saying this, they each extended a hand. Their wills on this matter were surprisingly consistent, so there was no dispute over this action. A blasphemy card appeared in the palm of each of the 3 hands. Hobert, of course, knew it was a blasphemy card, and he also knew it was the Red Priest card. "Your destinies have already been written," Hobert said. "However, I can distort the pen of Allbringer-hood to bring someone you can easily possess here more quickly." If Medici had a face, he would surely be filled with shock. The Creator knows Adam's plan. Why would he know? Einhorn, the Creator can distort the pen of Allbringer-hood. That's right, his distortion has become abstract. For him, all things can be distorted. If these 3 small ghosts had eyes, they would certainly look at each other and see disbelief in each other's eyes. Actually, Medici's request was a test he was conducting. How could a dignified Angel King and angels give up testing because of pain? The sudden appearance of the Creator made the 3 sworn enemies unite for the first time against a single foe. However, Medici's test was more skillful, more like making a request than conducting a test. At this point, the 3 ghosts were completely convinced and no longer dared to harbor any thoughts of testing him. The Creator saying this meant he agreed to help, and they wisely handed the blasphemy card in their hands to Raft. However, if they had known that the pen of Allbringer-hood would still bring that one-eyed man, even if they did nothing, they would surely have had the urge to chop off their hands. Einhorn asked, "Great the Creator, what is our future destiny?" Adam couldn't possibly come and tell them how he would write their destinies. They could only perceive through their high sequence that their destinies seemed to have entered Adam's story, but they didn't know what specific story, whether tragedy or comedy, was arranged for them. The Creator paused for a few seconds, as if overlooking their destinies. In reality, the Creator was recalling their later circumstances. A few seconds later, the Creator said in a solemn voice, "Reclaim humanity, Amen, Sequence 1. Then the Creator smiled and said, "Given Medici's loyalty to the ancient sun god, Adam, you can now consider it Adam will not treat you poorly." The Creator's words made Medici and the others even more obsequious. They didn't even consider why a god of the Black Emperor pathway would possess authority over destiny. Because the information provided by the Creator was enough to shock them. Reclaim humanity was easy to understand. After being malevolent spirits for so long, they no longer psychologically considered themselves human or beyonders. To reclaim humanity meant they had a chance to change their current state. Amen was their first point of surprise. Why would their future destiny be connected to this troublesome god of mischief? This was clearly the beginning of a tragedy. They still didn't know what Sequence 1 meant, but it should also be a crucial node. What surprised Medici even more was how the Creator knew his experiences so clearly. Had he always been loyal to the Almighty God? After the fall of this ancient sun god, Medici still chose to continue his loyalty to the true Creator, being one of the rare loyalists. But then, on second thought, this didn't seem too shocking. As long as the other party lived long enough and knew who he had always been loyal to, it wouldn't be difficult to guess his experiences. Adam is the son of the ancient sun god and would give his father's subordinates a chance. They could understand this point. But why did the Creator say, "You can now consider it Adam"? This sentence clearly contained a huge amount of information that they currently didn't quite understand. Even Klein, who already had extensive experience pretending to be an evil god, would find it difficult to fool these three troublesome fellows. But Hobert was different. He knew enough. Even the god of war, with his exceptional intellect and love for plotting conspiracies, was completely deceived. The Creator then said in a solemn voice, "All right, your matter is settled. Just wait patiently." Without waiting for Medici and the others to thank him, the Creator then said to Raft, "Go retrieve your family's belongings." Although Medici and the other two had a deep blood feud with Tudor, they showed enough restraint at this moment. After all, they had already killed many descendants of the Tudor family, Pound family, more than 30 years ago. Raft quickly put away the card, which carried a bone-chilling coldness, and entered the double stone door that had been pushed open long ago. Inside the stone chamber, the floor and walls were covered in fresh red blood, as if it had just been splashed, seeming ready to drip from the walls and ceiling at any moment. In the depths of the stone chamber were 3 black stone chairs, back to back, each with a skeleton sitting on it. One of the skeletons even had long red hair on its head. Even though the skeletons sat there motionless, even though they had long lost their vitality, the skeletons still made Raft feel a strong sense of aggression, as if they could stand up at any moment to eliminate any intruders into the stone chamber. Raft quickly averted his gaze to look at the scattered skeletons lying on the ground. Those were the real skeletons, scattered throughout the stone chamber, long devoid of any aggression. Next to the skeletons were some extraordinary characteristics with magical colors, as well as many seemingly unusual ornaments on the skeletons, which were sealed artifacts or extraordinary items. Raft took out the cloth bag he had prepared, which contained small compartments. He carefully and meticulously picked up the extraordinary characteristics one by one. At this moment, he felt like he was picking up gold bricks. 1, 2, 3, 8, 9. Wait, how did a few extra appear? Never mind, pick them up first. Next were the sealed artifacts and magical items, 5 in total. His prepared cloth bag was full. Finally, he searched the stone chamber and did not find the treasure he had imagined. Raft was a little nervous, wondering if the Creator would blame him. After all, he had previously said there was a great treasure inside to impress the Creator. This was not Raft lying, but rather a speculation found in the notes his grandfather, the patriarch, had given him. But there was indeed no treasure here. Should he carry out the skeletons on the stone chairs and tell the Creator that those were the treasures? Raft seemed to see himself being crushed into 3 pieces, dying tragically in the ruins. To be honest, Raft sighed, he could only hope for the Creator's mercy. After taking all the extraordinary characteristics, Raft bowed slightly towards the malevolent spirits outside the stone door, who had re-merged into one. This was politeness. Then he puffed out his chest and left. This was the pride of having the Creator as his backing. After Raft left, the ruins fell back into darkness, and Soren finally asked, "What now?" Einhorn coldly retorted, What now?" Soren, uncharacteristically, did not retort sarcastically, "The only thing we had to offer has been given away just like that." "Fool." Medici sneered. "You should be glad we can still question each other here and have received revelations about our destiny. Our contribution also expressed goodwill towards the Creator, isn't that enough?" Soren also said coldly, "Hey, are you preparing to acknowledge a new master again?" Quote. Thus began several hours of arguing. In the country of disorder, on the Iron Throne, Hobert watched Raft leave the ruins, then waited for his sacrifice. During this time, he projected the previously pixelated image of himself praying to himself into Elliot's star. Hobert had just seen Raft pick up 3 corrupted barren extraordinary characteristics in the stone chamber. He only needed to give one to Raft and continue to sell the extraordinary characteristic he had originally planned to sell to Elliot to him. Hobert first received Elliot's reply, and he could barely conceal his excitement. "Great the Creator, please inform that favored one that I am willing to purchase that extraordinary characteristic and can accept the price offered. I can sacrifice the gold to you tomorrow." It was only an overpayment of a few £100. For Elliot, this was incredibly cheap. In the South Continent, even £5,000 might not be enough to gather the corrupted barren potion ingredients. In the extraordinary world, Sequence 6 extraordinary materials became scarce, and the premium also increased accordingly. By 9:30 p.m., Raft finally prayed with some worry and fear. "Great the Creator, it was entirely because our family's intelligence misled me, making me believe there was a treasure in the ruins, and I did not intentionally deceive you. Your servant, with the most devout attitude, requests your forgiveness." Hobert on the Iron Throne was stunned. He was worried about this. "The card you placed on the altar is the greatest treasure." As Hobert's gaze swept over the altar, he saw a black line seemingly entwined around the extraordinary characteristics. This black line was not present in the ruins, and Raft had not reported it, indicating that these black lines could only be seen through true sight. After a brief thought, Hobert understood. This was a curse from a high-level malevolent spirit, which had not manifested in the ruins but appeared after leaving them. Medici did not offer a reminder because, in their view, the Creator should easily notice this and be able to resolve a curse of this level. These curses were indeed not difficult for Hobert to resolve. As for Raft's worries, Hobert pondered for a moment and suddenly thought of another place where this trump card piece could be used. "I really didn't plan to use you as a piece, but you're forcing my hand." So he responded with a supreme voice, "Do something for me to atone. Sacrifice all your gains to me, and prepare for a bestowal ritual tomorrow morning." Then Hobert projected the image of the black lines on the extraordinary characteristics into Raft's star, letting him experience it for himself. "Sorry, author was a bit busy last night and didn't get to read everyone's comments. If I have enough time tonight, I'll reply to them all." Backland, Civilis Street, Queens District, number 29. Raft, with a nervous heart, finally received the Creator's response, "Do something for me to atone. Sacrifice all your gains to me, and prepare for the bestowal ritual tomorrow morning." He let out a sigh of relief and quickly said, "Praise the Creator. Your benevolence is clearer than the crimson moon." Raft understood that his punishment likely included sacrificing all his gains, but what he couldn't understand was why he still needed to prepare for the bestowal ritual tomorrow. Just then, a scene suddenly appeared in Raft's mind. It was the altar he had set up, and a circle of black threads was wrapped around each extraordinary characteristic. Raft looked at the altar in surprise, unconsciously taking 2 steps back, but he didn't see anything wrong with the extraordinary characteristic. He then understood. The Creator had discovered something wrong with these extraordinary characteristics, and asking him to sacrifice them was to remove those black threads. As for preparing for the bestowal ritual, it was to give him those 2 extraordinary characteristics. Thinking of this, Raft was first surprised and delighted, then praised the Creator again, and quickly performed the sacrifice ritual, offering all his gains from tonight to the Creator. In the country of disorder, Hobert looked at the dazzling array of gains before him, feeling somewhat emotional. It turned out that fraud could indeed make one rich quickly. Look at today's gains, it was even more than what he earned desperately by returning to Backland and confronting the Tamara family some time ago. The level of the spoils was also higher. Hobert first used the power of order to cleanse all the extraordinary characteristics, and the curses quickly disappeared without a trace. He eagerly began to examine these most desirable extraordinary characteristics, and there were actually 4 sequence 5 level characteristics, 2 Chaos Mentors and 2 Reapers extraordinary characteristics. Hobert immediately used the power of the country of disorder to crush 1 Chaos Mentor extraordinary characteristic, then exploited loopholes in extraordinary characteristic aggregation to divide them into 5 portions using the power of order. At the latest by the second half of the night, they would aggregate into 5 extraordinary characteristics, from Briber to Chaos Mentor. As for the 2 extraordinary characteristics to be bestowed upon Raft, he would directly use the Corrupted Baron and Chaos Mentor extraordinary characteristics among them, and the rest would be Hobert's gains from this operation. This once again made Hobert sigh. Fraud is truly a lucrative industry. If he did a few more such operations, he would have to worry about his money getting moldy and needing to be regularly aired out in the yard. As for the other Chaos Mentor extraordinary characteristic, Hobert would, of course, use it himself. This was also why he risked going to commit fraud, to deceive Medici and them. The previous operation in Backland, although it caught the Tamara family off guard, did not achieve Hobert's ultimate goal, obtaining the Chaos Mentor extraordinary characteristic. Since becoming a Beander, Hobert had never worried about the extraordinary characteristic used for advancement. And now, the digestion speed of the Corrupted Baron potion far exceeded Hobert's expectations, having already digested nearly 2/3. Regarding this, Hobert had to thank the King of Fenaport for the fief he had chosen for him. If it were an ordinary or wealthy baronial fief, his potion would never have been digested so quickly. Establishing a ruling relationship and gradually becoming the ruler of a region was the shortcut to digesting the potion. Now it was good, he had the extraordinary characteristic needed for promotion, so he could confidently continue to digest the potion and no longer had to find ways to search for the main materials of the Sequence 5 potion. As for those 2 Reaper extraordinary characteristics, they were probably attracted by Medici and them, just like the previously discovered ancient death god's corpse, which also attracted many Beyonders, as well as a blasphemy card. In addition to the Sequence 5 level extraordinary characteristics, there were also 6 Sequence 6 level extraordinary characteristics, 3 Corrupted Barons and 3 Schemers. Additionally, there were 2 Briber extraordinary characteristics, which should have come from Raft's family members. After putting away the extraordinary characteristics, Hobert turned his gaze to that blasphemy card. With a wave of his hand, the blasphemy card came into Hobert's hand, and he first saw Rosal, clad in a red classical priestly robe under his armor. This blasphemy card had already been opened, but it was unknown whether Medici and them opened it, or if it was opened before it fell into Medici's hands. Like other blasphemy cards, Rosal's image was more 3-dimensional, his lips curved slightly upward, seemingly an arrogant and unreasonable expression, completely lacking the expression a priest should have. Instead, he looked a bit punchable, somewhat like a dictator holding military power, ready to start a war at any time. Because this was a sacrifice to the Creator, Raft did not dare to study it seriously, so he didn't understand the mysteries of this item that looked like a card. Hobert simply flipped through it and felt that it was like the instruction manual for the Red Priest pathway extraordinary characteristics he had just obtained. With this blasphemy card, he believed these extraordinary characteristics could play a greater role. Finally, Hobert's gaze stopped on the last page of the blasphemy card. Sequence 0. Red Priest. Main materials: 3 Conqueror extraordinary characteristics. Ritual: incite a continent-wide war and achieve sufficient victories. Hobert smiled. He now had another complete Pathways potion formula, and the richness of this potion formula was almost comparable to that of the Orthodox churches. He placed the Red Priest card next to the Black Emperor card. From now on, the creator had another image to show off with. Finally, Hobert's gaze turned to the 5 sealed artifacts and magical items. What first caught Hobert's attention was a black iron scepter. This scepter looked very simple, with no gems or other decorations on it, but Hobert, using the Country of Disorder's authority, knew that it was actually a Sequence 4-level sealed artifact. Its abilities included: it can amplify the wielder's own abilities, it can amplify the influence of certain rules, it can use certain seemingly ordinary rules to achieve unexpected effects in combat, it can make certain existing rules become chaos, turning order into disorder. Hobert guessed that this sealed artifact should have come from a fallen earl. He remembered that amplify and use seemed to be the signature skills of a fallen earl. However, the scepter's negative effects were also significant. The wielder's thoughts can easily become distortion. What was intended as an attack will turn into a defense. The wielder will become unusually greedy. Any wealth can attract his attention to a certain extent. The wielder will become fond of loud laughter, and sometimes the laughter will interrupt the casting of his own extraordinary abilities. Hobert smiled. This scepter could not only attack others but also attack the wielder. He was about to try to reseal the scepter, but his spirituality told him that he was currently unable to do so. Hobert had an epiphany: he might have to wait until Sequence 5 to effectively seal it. After another glance at the other sealed artifacts, Hobert decided to temporarily leave the Country of Disorder. He had stayed in the Country of Disorder for too long this time and was a little worried. Hobert's spiritual perception this time was very accurate. A few minutes after he returned to the real world, he heard the sound of gongs by the lake and the shouts of the town residents. The monster in the lake has come ashore. The monsters from the lake are ashore. Looking down from the mountain, the lights in the town by the lake gradually lit up, and the town seemed to be slowly waking up. The monsters in the lake often came ashore to forage, and the town's residents weren't exactly terrified, but they were always anxious. Previously, although there were the Great Lord and the Second Overlord in this territory, they only knew how to collect taxes and did not care about the lives of the town's residents. On the contrary, they would even find amusement in the residents of the town being chased and devoured by monsters on the mountain, where the monsters wouldn't go. And if they weren't driven away by force, the monsters would linger in the town. So the town's residents could only ask the knight for help. Only after gathering enough valuables would the knight bring his retainers to help drive away the monsters. But now it was different. As soon as Hobert heard the gongs, he immediately called Philip, Conrad, and Seal to his study. Seal. Immediately have the town's residents evacuate to the vicinity of the Lord's manor for shelter. Philip will lead the male servants to guide people and prepare the shelter space, and Conrad will lead his subordinates to maintain order. Once the elderly, children, and women have all retreated to the mountain, then organize the young and strong to attempt to encircle and kill the monsters. While Hobert was assigning tasks, Furs was also awakened and came to the study. Seeing Hobert putting on his cape as he spoke, she stepped forward to help him with it. Be careful. Hobert nodded and said to Philip and the others, hurry. Philip was still a little worried. Lord Seal, who had witnessed Hobert's power, laughed and said, don't worry, even if the monsters bite us all to death, the Lord will be fine. Hobert smiled at Furs, raised his greatsword, and quickly left. He had seen a monster when he first arrived in the territory. Although its strength was considerable, its intelligence didn't seem high. Such monsters were easy to kill. Hobert glanced at the sky. Clouds obscured the moon, a cold wind howled, and it was pitch black outside. Hobert didn't feel cold, instead, he felt a bit excited. As soon as he stepped out of the Lord's manor, he heard several people shouting outside, "The Lord has given an order. Come to the Lord's manor for shelter." It was Seal and the others, shouting as they walked down the mountain. Hobert smiled slightly. Ciel's quick thinking was finally being put to good use. Suddenly, Hobert seemed to think of something. He raised the longsword in his hand, and a bright light suddenly emanated from its tip. This was the use of the light priest ring's ability, but as Hobert injected more and more spirituality into the ring, his longsword became brighter and brighter, until it illuminated Hobert and the entire Lord's manor. Especially in the pitch-black night, this light was enough for everyone in the town to see. And the first batch of town residents who came to avoid danger saw Lord Hobert enveloped in holy light. This scene was etched into their minds, making it unforgettable for them for the rest of their lives. The Lord is truly a God blessed. He is like the stories of the blessed in the Life Bible, bright, sacred, and wise. In fact, Hobert did this simply hoping to become a lighthouse, guiding those seeking refuge and, incidentally, strengthening his directiveness as a Lord. Run towards the light emitted by the Lord, and you will reach the place of refuge. Hobert also didn't expect so many people to kneel before him, while more people were stunned in place, seemingly muttering something under their breath, though he didn't know what they were saying. When Hobert saw that the lights and torches in the town were all moving towards him, the light at the tip of his sword gradually extinguished. Everyone around had their vision momentarily darkened by the previous light, and it seemed that lamps and torches were not very effective. Only after everyone had adapted to the dark environment did they realize that the Lord had already disappeared. At this moment, Hobert was strolling through the streets of the town. The land around the town was very fertile, so even with frequent monster attacks, there were still many residents in the town. It was just that many residents had been killed by monsters in recent years, leaving many ownerless houses in the town. Now, those ownerless houses belonged to the Lord's manor, or more specifically, to Hobert. Help! Hobert immediately rushed into a courtyard, following the sound. A young couple was cornered by a monster at their doorstep. The wife, holding a child, looked at the monster in front of her with a terrified expression. The husband, holding an axe, bravely confronted the monster, feigning composure. And that monster was somewhat similar to a type of fish in Hobert's memory, the kind of fish that first evolved limbs in the ocean. Its head had most of the characteristics of a fish, its body was covered in scales, it had short but powerful limbs, and a thick tail with fins. The monster's movements when exerting force were very similar to a crocodile's. After gathering strength in its limbs, it seized the opportunity and lunged fiercely at the young man holding the axe. The young man, frightened, dodged while wildly swinging his axe, but after a long time of hacking, he didn't hit anything. Looking back towards the doorway, the monster's tail was being stepped on by a person wearing a cape. The 3-meter-long monster was like a freshly caught fish, unable to escape no matter how it bounced, jumped, or twisted. Only then did the monster remember to turn its head to bite, but a black shadow flashed, and the monster was already headless. At this point, the young man recognized him. Lord Hobert stopped the young man who was about to kneel in thanks, to the Lord's manor. Yes, yes, yes. Their family had been sleeping too soundly just now and hadn't heard the gongs. Seal and the others' shouts had woken them up, but by then it was already too late. Watching them hastily leave the town, Hobert jumped onto the town's somewhat dilapidated clock tower. This was the tallest building in the town, and Hobert could roughly see the entire town using his spirit vision. Everyone should have evacuated, and the monsters had begun their attack. Hobert quietly watched them and soon discovered that these monsters were clearly organized, rushing into the town in 3 batches from 3 different directions. The poultry and livestock that couldn't be taken away, as well as the guard dogs left in the courtyards, all met a tragic end. Hobert, meanwhile, pondered that if he had 100 soldiers armed with advanced rifles, he could easily stop the monsters' charge. Unfortunately, he didn't, so the Lord himself had to charge into battle. Spotting the most ferocious monster attack, Hobert used the Ocean Pendant's low-flight ability to fly over, corrosion. Without needing to charge up, the corrosion ability immediately corrupted the monsters' minds. The dozen or so monsters at the very front immediately began to tear at each other. Hobert then summoned Wind Blade, and 3 monsters were instantly cut with extremely deep wounds by the sharp Wind Blade, blood splattering far and wide. There was no one else here, so Hobert began to use the 30 to 40 monsters with the strongest charging momentum as targets, familiarizing himself with the Ocean Pendant's abilities as much as possible. Under Lightning Strike, one monster was inevitably burned to charcoal, while the surrounding monsters were electrocuted into numbness, making it difficult for them to move for a while. Wind Blade had a larger area of effect, but the monsters had tough hides and thick flesh. Although Wind Blade could make them bleed profusely, it was difficult to inflict fatal wounds. As Hobert was pondering the use of the Ocean Pendant, his spirituality suddenly sensed danger. Hobert quickly left the monsters and took off his cape, which was already covered in blood. Suddenly, a loud voice rang out, "The use of sealed artifacts and magical items is prohibited here." It was the voice of the Punishment Knight who had escaped from here a few days ago. Hobert sneered. They really knew how to pick their moments. Or perhaps, this monster attack was related to them. However, this was not the time to ponder that. The enemy's attack came suddenly. The corrupted Baron and Pyromaniac, who had recovered their state, charged at Hobert from both sides. The corrupted Baron kicked over a severed monster limb, completing the bribe process, weakening. Hobert once again used the Order Crystal's shield ability to block the opponent's weakening. The Punishment Knight immediately felt his strength increase. He sneered inwardly, "The reason this kid is so powerful is because he's piled up magical items." The Punishment Knight's level of prohibition didn't mean that Hobert couldn't use magical items after prohibition of magical item use was declared. Hobert could still use them, but each time he did, the Punishment Knight's strength would increase. Moreover, when the Punishment Knight carried out his punishment for Hobert's defiance of the prohibition, Hobert usually found it difficult to evade and was in a state of being weakened by the opponent. This was the so-called punishment. The Pyromaniac, charging at the front, used Burning Wall to trap Hobert, creating an opportunity for the Punishment Knight's subsequent punishment. The corrupted Baron, meanwhile, kept his distance, ready to encircle Hobert at any moment. This was a tactic they had discussed long ago. If it were any other Beander, given the Cold Knight squad's absolute first move advantage, they might have died here tonight. But Hobert was, of course, different. He still had many unrevealed strengths. The Punishment Knight was about to begin his punishment according to the tactic. He felt his strength increase again, and he sneered, "Death." Suddenly, 2 bronze gates with complex mystical patterns appeared beside the Punishment Knight. Eyes, difficult to describe, peered out from within the gates. The members of the Cold Knight squad immediately felt as if they were being targeted by something terrifying. The monsters that were about to pounce on Hobert also scattered immediately out of fear, as if clearing the battlefield for everyone. Death. The Punishment Knight used his extraordinary ability, but he was grabbed by pale hands reaching out from the bronze gates. He had no choice but to use death on these arms. However, the effect was not significant, as the owners of those arms had long been dead. Screams of agony emanated from within the bronze gates, igniting the fear in the hearts of the Punishment Knight and the others, making it difficult for them to concentrate for a while. Hobert's counterattack began. He re-entered a low-flight state, like a diving eagle, rushing towards the Pyromaniac, who was diligently concentrating flames to burn the underworld gate. At the same time, he used Lightning Strike to attack the corrupted Baron. Although the Punishment Knight's strength continued to increase, he would still find it difficult to break free from the underworld gate within a few seconds. The corrupted Baron also tried his best to avoid Lightning Strike, but this skill had a certain tracking effect. Unless countered by other abilities of the same level, it would be difficult to escape the fate of being struck. Hobert had experience from previous adventures. Even if the Lightning Strike's landing point was distorted, and he wasn't directly hit by Lightning Strike, he would still be affected by the accompanying paralysis, slowing his movements for 2 or 3 seconds. So Hobert created an excellent opportunity to attack the pyromaniac. While flying over, an uncontrolled stone had already been thrown ahead, uncontrolled. The pyromaniac's eyes narrowed. With previous experience, he naturally knew the power of the uncontrolled stone, so he quickly raised his pistol and once again accurately hit the uncontrolled stone in the night, then swiftly dodged. For Hobert, it didn't matter if the uncontrolled stone didn't achieve the desired effect. In any case, it completed the bribe process, weakening. The pyromaniac felt his agility and strength being weakened. He could only barely dodge the longsword in Hobert's hand and was soon cut with a wound by the longsword. Fortunately, the wound was not deep, and the pyromaniac didn't take it too seriously. Exile. Hobert felt a huge pushing force that actually propelled him over 10 meters away. It turned out that the punishment knight had already escaped. A pile of lava had appeared in front of the underworld gate, burning off many of the pale arms. This prompted Hobert to immediately end the summoning of the underworld gate, which consumed a massive amount of spirituality, and the 2 bronze gates subsequently disappeared. Hobert didn't know what ability the punishment knight had used to escape so quickly. The punishment knight and the other 2 barely hesitated. After Hobert was pushed away, they once again chose to retreat. This time, Hobert did not pursue, because he had decided that he, too, would launch a surprise attack on them. As for how to find them, Hobert glanced at the greatsword in his hand and gave a faint smile. He had noticed earlier that the corrupted Baron already had severe dark circles under his eyes. Although fighting was fine now, after tonight, his combat effectiveness would definitely be affected. The reason they were so eager to launch a second round of attacks should be largely related to the corrupted Baron's imminent inability to resist falling asleep. And the pyromaniac was cut again, he. Hobert suddenly realized that he had quite a few dirty tricks. The Cold Knight Squad's surprise attack did not cause Hobert any psychological pressure. On the contrary, it put immense pressure on the Cold Knight Squad. At this moment, a clueless monster rushed out from the street. Hobert raised his longsword and entered a new battle. Hobert soon discovered that these monsters seemed to be probing him in an organized manner, and their attacks even had a certain tactical element. This made Hobert disengage from the battle and return to the top of the clock tower, quietly observing these monsters. He soon discovered that the monsters were communicating with unpleasant sounds, and he found a human figure among the monsters. Apologies, I still haven't been able to reply to everyone's comments today. Tomorrow, perhaps. Tomorrow I'll have time to talk about what the author has encountered in the past 2 days, it's quite interesting. More than an hour later, Seal and Philip led over 100 young men, armed with spears and hunting rifles, to provide support. Before Hobert arrived here, the town's residents had no cohesion, so each time they had to drive away monsters, they could only ask the organized knight to take action. Now it was different, thanks to Hobert's previous actions, the beam of light from tonight, and the couple who had retreated to the Lord's manor, who recounted the events vividly. Under the call of Seal and Philip, all young men who had not been injured during the retreat were willing to support the Lord. Soon, they saw the streets still flowing with blood, and some monsters that were barely clinging to life. Seal led his men at the forefront, stabbing the 2 not quite dead monsters with spears, and everyone was surprised by the number of monsters killed. Generally, after killing 4 or 5 monsters, the monsters would retreat back to Full Moon Lake. According to the corpses they saw, more than a dozen monsters had already died at the Lord's hands. At this moment, someone found a cloak on the ground. This is the Lord's cloak, could he? Each time the monsters attacked, someone would always be devoured by them, and their bodies would be impossible to find, only some of their blood-stained clothes. Nonsense. Seal said, perhaps the blood on the cloak made the Lord take it off. I remember when we were at the mountain church, the Lord also threw away his blood-stained cloak. Although he said this, he was actually unsure in his heart. These monsters were different from the bandits on the mountain. A single bite could leave one crippled, if not dead. Even the knight had to use traps and fire, which monsters hated most, to drive them away, if fighting head-on, the knight could only deal with one monster alone. There are more monster corpses over there. After someone discovered new corpses, Seal and Philip finally breathed a sigh of relief, followed the trail of bodies, and everyone pursued them out of the town. The number of monster corpses again surprised everyone, and someone kept counting, 38. The Lord has already killed 38 monsters. This was incredible. Everyone had initially thought there would be a fierce battle tonight, and that they would eventually, with the Lord's wise command, difficultly overcome the monsters' assault. But now, the most dangerous thing they had to do was to be careful not to get splashed by the blood when finishing off the monsters. The rest of the task was counting the corpses. Following the corpses left on the ground, everyone pursued them into the reed swamp, a place they usually tried to avoid. This area used to be fertile land, but after monsters appeared in the lake, people dared not cultivate near the lake, and gradually the good farmland turned into a reed swamp. This time, relying on their numbers, everyone boldly chased into the reed swamp. In the reed swamp, they discovered another battlefield where an intense fight had occurred, finding more than a dozen monster corpses around it, as well as the Lord's jacket, which was soaked with blood. And on the jacket, they saw a huge hole. Anyone who had seen people bitten by monsters immediately recognized it as a mark left by a monster's bite. Seal and Philip exchanged glances. If their guess was correct, the monsters had actually ambushed the Lord here, and one had bitten him in the chest and abdomen area. Their hearts sank. Could the Lord really have been bitten to death and eaten by a monster? Fortunately, more monster corpses were found further ahead. However, the monster corpses in the reed swamp were not as dense as those outside the town. There was a body only every long distance, and without exception, they were all killed from behind. Whoosh, whoosh. Seal led his men, parting the reeds at the very front, while closely watching their surroundings, fearing that a monster might suddenly rush out. It wasn't until they reached the lakeside that they saw a figure sitting on a rock by the water. At this moment, the dark clouds in the sky dispersed, and the bright moonlight returned to the earth. Everyone quickly recognized him. It was indeed the Lord. The Lord had a long sword on his shoulder, his upper clothes were torn open, revealing his chest, and he was staring blankly at the lake. Not far from the rock, there was also a smaller monster. That monster had very long hind limbs. If it weren't for its long tail, it would look more like a scaly, naked person. "You've arrived," Hobert said. "This reed swamp should also be included in the Lord's manor. It will be the Lord's private land, and I will hire people to plant some things I need." Everyone recovered from their shock, not surprised that the Lord was annexing the reed swamp into the Lord's manor, but rather surprised that there were no wounds where the Lord's clothes were torn. Seeing Hobert safe and sound, Seal finally breathed a complete sigh of relief. He had just tasted the flavor of power and didn't want to lose it so quickly. Only Seal and Philip here knew some of the Lord's nature. The others stood aside, very surprised, not daring to even breathe loudly. Seal pointed curiously at the corpse beside the rock and asked, "Lord, is this also a monster?" "This is the monster's leader," Hobert said. "All the monsters that attacked the town this time listened to its command. Its intelligence is quite high. It even designed an ambush and arranged death-defying warriors to bite me with their lives. Of course, it might also be that other monsters can execute its orders without compromise, which is why it's harder to kill. In fact, its combat power is ordinary." Hobert glanced at Full Moon Lake again. There seemed to be one or two more monsters like this in the lake that are closer to human form, but it was too dark just now, and I didn't pursue them. After explaining a few sentences, Hobert said in a commanding tone, "Gather all the monster corpses, do not burn them for now, I have other uses for them." Extraordinary materials had condensed on the monster leader's body, and Hobert believed that some part of the ordinary monster corpses might also have extraordinary effects, so he told them to keep the corpses. As he spoke, Hobert jumped off the rock and walked back, holding his sword. "You can go home. For the next month or two, the monsters in the lake will not dare to attack the town again." After entering the reed swamp, Hobert saw that everyone was still in shock and didn't immediately follow. So, he simply used tremble to return to the Lord's manor, to his own courtyard. Furs was still waiting in the study. Seeing Hobert return safely, she felt relieved and went back to rest. However, before leaving, she glanced at Hobert's chest, her cheeks slightly flushed as she departed. Hobert returned to his room, changed his clothes, took a shower, and then fell into a deep sleep. Around 4 in the morning, Hobert suddenly opened his eyes. He planned to raid the Cold Night Squad tonight, a decision he had made when he saw the Punishment Knight and others leave. Hobert didn't know if this counted as holding a grudge overnight. They had fought last night, and now it was already early morning of the next day. Regardless, Hobert felt that doing this was quite exciting. As for how to find the Cold Night Squad, Hobert had already thought it through. He grasped his two-handed sword and then used the ability of the Faceless Man necklace, the current whereabouts of the person it cut. Through the divination ability of the Faceless Man necklace, Hobert saw several people lying or standing in a dilapidated house. Hobert saw that the pyromaniac's knife wounds had started to act up, and he was pale, curled up under the quilt and trembling. The corrupted Baron leaned against the wall, clearly exhausted but afraid to fall asleep. A young man whose hair and beard had been burned off was changing towels for the pyromaniac and splashing cold water on the corrupted Baron's face. This should be the young man who was hit by the divine light in the previous battle and then rescued. And the captain of the Cold Night Squad, the Punishment Knight, was standing with his arms crossed, frowning as if trying to come up with a solution. The divination scene ended there, and Hobert exited the dream divination. He once again sighed. Divination is so useful. This made him once again covet K's sequence. However, he only thought about it. Overall, he still preferred to charge into battle and didn't like to put all his skill points into wisdom. Hobert unhurriedly put on his clothes, but he only had 2 cloaks and no new ones to wear. Over this period, Hobert had gradually grown fond of Fenaport-style cloaks. They indeed made him look more majestic. He planned to have the town's tailor make him a few at dawn, considering it a way to stimulate domestic demand. Then Hobert took down the oil painting from the wall, held the Faceless Man necklace in his other hand for positioning, and at the same time injected his spirituality into the Traveler's Blade, using the travel ability. The space in front of Hobert instantly became illusory. He stepped into the spirit world, and guided by the Faceless Man necklace, he quickly emerged from the spirit world and arrived in front of a somewhat dilapidated civilian house. Hobert didn't give the people inside a chance to react. He held the oil painting in front of him and used flash to instantly appear inside the house. The positions of the 4 people were similar to their stances in the divination scene, except that the spirituality of the Punishment Knight and the corrupted Baron had already sensed danger, and they had adopted defensive postures. But it was all too late. As Hobert had planned, the Punishment Knight happened to see the oil painting Hobert was holding in front of him. With a reluctant and even somewhat distorted expression, he said, "What a beautiful landscape." Although the effect of the oil painting was simple, its grade was not low, at least at the Sequence 5 level, making it difficult for the Punishment Knight to avoid its influence. Seeing the oil painting again, the corrupted Baron showed a look of fear, clearly having been tormented quite a bit in the past few days. The monster with eyes on its chest reappeared and bestowed curses upon the 4 members of the Cold Night Squad. Distortion. The corrupted Baron once again distorted the target of the curse. Exile. The Punishment Knight exiled Hobert. In his opinion, that monster posed no threat to them at all. A huge force pushed Hobert out of the house. During the process of being exiled, Hobert threw the oil painting into the yard. After the exile process ended, he also arrived in the yard and immediately spread his arms to embrace the sun, divine light. A huge pillar of light pierced through the roof, filling the entire room with sacred light. After the divine light ended, Hobert saw that in the ruined room, the monster had already been purified by the holy light. After being hit by the divine light again, that Sequence 8 was kneeling on the ground, engulfed in flames, praise the sun. The pyromaniac was convulsing, looking on the verge of death. If it were certain rituals of the sun sequence, his knife wounds could be healed, but the divine light was an offensive extraordinary ability. Although the knife wounds were reduced, the pyromaniac's life was also almost gone. The corrupted Baron seemed to have avoided most of the Divine Light's attacks, but he hadn't dared to sleep for the past few days, and his condition was already very poor. After being attacked mentally by the Divine Light, he immediately began to lose control. And the Punishment Knight had already escaped. He now had no energy or means to care for his teammates. Hobert did not pursue, but instead used his blade to kill the dazed, corrupted Baron and the pyromaniac, who had only one breath left. That Sequence 8 had been burned to death, and even in death, he maintained his posture of praising the sun. Using the psychic wine glass to accelerate the precipitation of the extraordinary characteristic, and after recovering the extraordinary characteristic, villagers nearby, awakened by the previous noise, were rushing over to check. Before they arrived, Hobert picked up the oil painting and manipulated the bodies of the corrupted Baron and the pyromaniac to carry away the burnt body. After manipulating them into the nearby river, Hobert, taking advantage of the night before dawn, used low flight to observe the surroundings. Full Moon Lake was not far away. This place was close to Hobert's territory. After confirming his direction, Hobert used travel again to return to the Lord's Manor. Back in his bedroom, Hobert checked his watch. The entire operation took less than 8 minutes, most of which was spent manipulating the bodies into the river. The actual combat time was less than 20 seconds. This was the power of a surprise attack. The corrupted Baron and the pyromaniac, who were not in good condition, could hardly play a role in such a battle. Hobert smiled. This is called treating others as they treat you. Since the Cold Knight squad liked to sneak attack so much, Hobert would sneak attack them back, and not just once. Hobert sacrificed the 3 extraordinary characteristics to the country of disorder. After returning to the real world, he immediately lay down and used meditation to fall asleep as quickly as possible. When it was past 6 in the morning and the sky was bright, Hobert woke up again. He took down the oil painting and performed divination again, the current location of the Punishment Knight marked by the oil painting early this morning. The current location of the Punishment Knight marked by the oil painting early this morning. Hobert made the divination statement so detailed because he was afraid that the oil painting might have marked other Punishment Knights before. However, it was different for the two-handed sword. Hobert had only used it to hack people before, and those people were all dead, so it couldn't be called a cut. Therefore, the divination statement could be simpler. After reciting the divination statement 7 times, Hobert used meditation to enter a semi-sleep, semi-awake state again. He saw the Punishment Knight sitting in a patch of dry grass, resting with his eyes closed. Hobert's prediction was correct. At this moment, it was when a person was most fatigued, especially for someone who had been on the move all night and barely closed their eyes. Even a Beander can't help it find a place to rest. However, the Punishment Knight, having learned from the corrupted Baron's previous lesson, dared not sleep and could only rest with his eyes closed. Although the result of the divination might not be instantaneous, Hobert had added the word, "now," to the divination statement, which indicated that it should have just happened, and even if there were changes, they should not be significant. Hobert pondered for a moment, then used the method of bestowal to retrieve the revolver he had previously placed in the country of disorder. Among the spoils of the Cold Knight squad, there were some pistol bullets. Hobert immediately loaded the bullets into the cylinder and released the safety. Then, holding the gun in one hand, he hung the Faceless Man necklace on his wrist, held the dream-stealing watch in his hand, and once again used travel to step into the spirit world. Guided by the Faceless Man necklace, Hobert quickly left the spirit world again. As his vision became colorful, Hobert adopted a fighting stance. As soon as he left the spirit world, Hobert saw that the Punishment Knight's face still showed obvious fatigue, but a spiritual warning made him stand up, though he hadn't yet had time to assume a fighting stance. Apparently, the Punishment Knight didn't expect Hobert to be able to track him down. Hobert first reached out and grabbed, stealing the Punishment Knight's thoughts for the next second. Then he immediately fired, continuously firing all 6 bullets. The punishment knight immediately dodged after regaining consciousness, but was still hit by 4 bullets in succession. The bullets themselves, of course, would not cause serious damage to the punishment knight, but the muttering and pawn effects of the bullets distorted the punishment knight's expression, making it difficult for him to effectively counterattack for a while. Hobert first summoned a lightning strike. Although the punishment knight tried his best to dodge, he was still struck by the lightning strike, and his whole body turned charred black. Immediately after, Hobert raised both arms, divine light. A huge pillar of light descended, completely engulfing the punishment knight. After the pillar of light, Hobert saw a scroll burning in the punishment knight's hand, clearly indicating that he had used some ability to avoid most of the divine light's attacks. Even so, the punishment knight was now in a very sorry state, with much of his clothes and hair burned, and the paralyzing effect of the lightning strike had clearly not completely worn off. Seeing that this had not severely wounded the punishment knight, Hobert quickly poured his spirituality into the psychic wine glass, Underworld Gate. The simple, terrifying gaze of the punishment knight from last night reappeared. He was immediately grabbed by countless pale arms, and chilling shouts echoed in his ears. The punishment knight was instantly affected by these negative effects. He looked very weak, breathing heavily, and trying to reach into his pocket as if to retrieve some magical item. Taking advantage of his opponent's weakness, Hobert drew his blade and stabbed it into the punishment knight's chest and abdomen. The punishment knight immediately showed a surprised expression, apparently finding it difficult to defend against Hobert's attack any longer. But as Hobert approached, the punishment knight's outstretched hand suddenly seemed to gain strength. He took another scroll from his pocket and threw it at Hobert, blazing white spear. The scroll suddenly ignited with a huge flame, forming the shape of a long spear. The punishment knight thrust it forward, plunging it into Hobert's chest. PFF'd. Only a paper figure remained in front of the punishment knight. Whoosh! The paper figure was immediately burned by the blazing white spear. Hobert appeared a few meters away. Seeing the smile on the punishment knight's face, he realized he had been tricked. A Sequence 5 with rich combat experience, even after being continuously struck by Sequence 5 level abilities, still hadn't become too weak. Not only that, he even had the mental energy to scheme against Hobert. Immediately after, the punishment knight threw the blazing white spear in his hand towards Hobert. It could easily hit the target without aiming. Hobert quickly used successive flashes to dodge the blazing white spear. At this moment, the punishment knight took out another scroll, from which countless streams of lava erupted, melting and burning off those pale arms again. After breaking free, the punishment knight immediately fled. Hobert pursued him using low flight. No flying here. Hobert fell from the low altitude. In terms of speed alone, he couldn't catch up to the punishment knight at all. However, Hobert didn't intend to pursue relentlessly. As soon as the punishment knight broke free, his advantage of surprise was lost, and he might fall into a bitter battle next. So, after an unsuccessful attempt to pursue, Hobert used travel to return to his room. He found the last bottle of potion he had bought from Viscount Glain to speed up spiritual recovery and drank it in one gulp. From last night until now, he had used Underworld Gate twice, Divine Light twice, and Lightning Strike several times. These powerful offensive abilities had consumed a large amount of his spirituality. At this moment, Hobert felt that his spirituality was only 1/3 left, making a third surprise attack difficult. However, the time between the third surprise attack could not be too long. If the punishment knight was given time to set up traps or find reinforcements, then this war of attrition might have to continue. After drinking the potion, Hobert also asked the kitchen to prepare his breakfast in advance. While waiting for breakfast, he again used meditation to sleep, which helped restore his spirituality. After only about 30 minutes of sleep, Hobert was woken up by Roy and went to the dining room for breakfast. After eating unhurriedly and drinking a sip of tea, Hobert felt that his spirituality had recovered by more than half. He looked at the time. It was not yet 7 o'clock, and only a little over 50 minutes had passed since the last surprise attack. However, if it came to comparing conditions, he believed his condition was much better than the punishment knight's. So Hobert again divined the punishment knight's location. He was still running, his face full of fatigue, and even simple running could make a sequence 5 sweat profusely. And the direction he was running was towards the village Hobert had first attacked them. Hobert seemed to understand. After checking his magical items, he again used travel to appear in front of the punishment knight. The punishment knight now showed a horrified expression. He could, of course, see that Hobert's condition had recovered a lot. He gasped, "X." Before he could shout, "Exile," Hobert had already reached out and grabbed, stealing his thoughts. Immediately after, Hobert's image suddenly grew taller. Death. He threw a punch, hitting the target just as the punishment knight regained his senses, sending him flying. Following closely, Hobert used a flash to catch up and plunged his tachi into the punishment knight's heart. This was the day before yesterday, and Author was about to enter the most anticipated part of replying to comments and counting monthly votes, but then he received a call saying that his car had been in an accident and he needed to deal with it immediately. Someone asked me what brand of car it was. It was a moped. Author was also puzzled. The car was just parked there, what kind of accident could it have had? After going downstairs, Author found that there was indeed a police car next to Author's small moped, and the key thing was that the moped had fallen to the ground. After inquiring, he learned that a car had hit Author's small moped. The disgusting thing was that the driver actually called the police, saying that Author hadn't parked within the designated area, which caused him to hit it, resulting in paint damage to his car. To be honest, Author had seen similar news before and thought it was made up, but friends, it's not. It turns out that in real life, there really are such disgusting people. The police officer was very reasonable. After failing to persuade the other party, he had to call the traffic police to determine responsibility. To be honest, it was quite a waste of public resources, because Author's small moped only had a bent bumper. Yes, you read that right, Author had installed a bumper on his small moped back then. Finally, the traffic police announced that Author was not responsible. The car driver, hearing that he also had to pay for Author's car repairs, immediately refused and clamored about going through legal procedures. Anyway, it was a long argument, and it was very late when he returned. This matter wasn't over yet. The next day, the other party argued for a long time again before finally paying Author a total of 280 yuan for repair costs. Author suspected that guy was just idle, arguing all night and then all morning, resulting in 2 consecutive days without time to reply to everyone's comments. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.